I was staring at the job adjustment agreement Su Qing had pushed towards me, while her suit-clad lover, Chen Lang, stood behind her, his hand on the back of her chair like a male dog marking its territory. Sign it. Su Qing's voice was cold, even carrying a hint of condescending pity. Jiang Han, you've been in this position for too long. The company needs fresh blood. Chen Lang is more suitable to lead the team forward. Jiang Han picked up the pen, twirling it between his fingers. He saw the corners of Su Qing's mouth unconsciously curl up, as if she could already see him leaving like a defeated dog. The abstract painting behind him, which he had personally bid for and was worth 8 figures, now reflected the light streaming in from the window, like an ironic tombstone. Okay, he said. Then the pen fell, the paper making a soft scratching sound. His signing was so decisive that Su Qing was momentarily stunned. Chen Lang's hand rose from the back of the chair and rested on Su Qing's shoulder, as if silently celebrating a victory. Jiang Han capped his pen and gently placed it on the table with a click. He looked up, his gaze passing over Su Qing and fixed on Chen Lang's smug face. He suddenly smiled. I signed, but I have a condition. Jiang Han's voice was calm. That money in my private fund, the portion of my premarital property, I'm taking now. Su Qing's smile froze for a moment, then turned into an offended impatience. She knew that money was roughly what he had accumulated over the years through company dividends and external investments. But in her eyes, it was only a small part of a large sum. What else do you think you can take? Su Qing looked at him mockingly. That money requires my joint authorization to be used. No. Jiang Han pulled a folded piece of paper from his suit pocket, unfolded it, and pushed it in front of Su Qing. This is the notarized copy of the premarital property disposal authorization you signed back then. It clearly states that the initial funds in my account and all subsequent legal investment income are to be disposed of entirely by me, without the need for my spouse's joint signature. Su Qing's expression changed. She reached for the piece of paper, her fingertips trembling slightly. It was an addendum she'd hastily signed years ago as a show of sincerity to trick Jiang Han into signing a prenuptial agreement more favorable to her. She'd almost forgotten about it. Jiang Han had already stood up, straightening his cuffs. His phone vibrated again, this time several times in quick succession, like a rapid drumbeat. You. Su Qing jumped up, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. Jiang Han, what do you mean? What do you think that little bit of money can do? Without the company platform, you're nothing. Jiang Han picked up his phone from the table. The screen was lit, a series of bank transfer notifications popping up. He glanced at the top number, then calmly turned the screen towards Su Qing. It's not that little bit of money. He said it was 18 billion US dollars. The color drained from Su Qing's face instantly. She snatched the phone, her pupils contracting sharply. The long string of numbers on the screen almost suffocated her. Chen Lang also glanced over, his hand on Su Qing's shoulder abruptly withdrawing. This is impossible. How could you? When did you? Su Qing screamed. Jiang Han had already reached the office door. He turned around, looking at the panicked couple, his tone even carrying a hint of gentleness. Oh, right. Su Qing, I just left a New Year's gift for the company's database server. It'll be playing in about 3 minutes. I suggest you check your computer now. He pushed open the door, the wind from the corridor rushing in, making his shirt hem flutter slightly. Behind him came the sound of Su Qing frantically rushing towards the desk, and Chen Lang's furious shouts as he tried to stop him. Jiang Han didn't turn around. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for B2. The moment the elevator doors closed, through the last crack, he saw Su Qing facing the computer screen, her face ashen, silently uttering 2 words. Judging from her lip movements, it sounded like Jiang Han. The elevator descended, a feeling of weightlessness washing over him. Jiang Han glanced down at his phone at the now empty account balance and the anonymous digital wallet containing all his new chips. The corners of his mouth finally deepened a little. The game begins. His first step had already secured victory. When Su Qing placed the printed job adjustment agreement and voluntary resignation application side by side in front of Jiang Han, the mandheling coffee Chen Lang had just brewed for her on the desk was steaming perfectly, its aroma carrying a hint of victorious arrogance. She leaned back in her large leather office chair, her fingertips lightly tapping the table, the rhythm unhurried. as if performing a play she had rehearsed countless times. Outside the window was the city's financial center skyline. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a glow on her well-maintained face, making her look like an impeccable queen, ready to bestow a final act of dignity upon her subjects. Jiang Han, let me be frank with you, Su Qing said, her voice cool and businesslike. The board is very dissatisfied with the group's performance over the past 6 months, especially the overseas acquisition project you led. The return on investment is severely unbalanced. They need someone more driven, someone who understands new market strategies better. To take this position, she paused, her gaze like a scalpel, precisely tracing Jiang Han's calm, expressionless face. Jiang Han sat opposite her, relaxed yet ramrod straight, his hands clasped on his knees, like a defendant patiently awaiting sentencing, or an observer who already knew the outcome. He wore a well-tailored dark gray suit, his tie impeccably tied, compared to Chen Lang, who could barely conceal his smugness. He looked more like a leader. Chen Lang stood behind Su Qing, one hand resting on the back of his chair, his suit jacket open, tie loose, a seemingly humble yet arrogant smile playing on his lips. He glanced down at Su Qing's hair every now and then, his eyes filled with a tacit understanding and intimacy only they understood. He had waited for this day for almost 2 years. Chen Lang's abilities are undeniable, Su Qing continued, as if reciting a memorized script. His performance data in the marketing department was there for all to see, and he was the one who brought in several major clients, letting him take over as the group's vice president, responsible for daily operations and strategic planning, is, in my opinion, a decision that aligns with the times. You can gracefully step down to the sidelines. The company will retain your consultant title and corresponding benefits. She emphasized the word gracefully, as if offering a sweet poison. Jiang Han finally lifted his gaze from the 2 documents on the table and landed on Su Qing's face. He didn't look at Chen Lang. That complete disregard was more painful to a scheming victor than any words. Chen Lang's fingers tightened on the back of his chair for a moment, then relaxed. I'll sign, Jiang Han said, his voice calm and devoid of any emotion, like commenting on the weather. Su Qing's prepared speech about considering the big picture, parting amicably, and being responsible to the team was instantly choked back. She was prepared for his anger, questioning, and even his resentful entanglement. But she hadn't expected him to be so decisive that all her prepared weapons fell flat, making her seem aggressive and unfairly victorious. What did you say? Su Qing subconsciously asked, leaning forward slightly, a scrutinizing look she herself didn't realize. I said I'll sign, Jiang Han repeated, even reaching for the Mont-Blanc pen on the table, uncapping it, and hovering the nib above the signature line of the voluntary resignation application. But before that, I have a condition. Su Qing's nerves immediately tensed again. She knew no one would so easily give up the position they'd fought half their lives to climb. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, adopting a defensive posture. What condition? If it's about share buyback or compensation, it's all written in the agreement. Just follow the procedures. It's not compensation. Jiang Han held the pen, the nib not yet falling. He raised his eyes, his gaze calmly meeting hers. His deep gaze made Su Qing's heart skip a beat. The money in my private account, through the investments made with Wudong Capital and Xingyun Fund, plus the accumulated dividends from previous projects, is now approximately a certain amount. I need to withdraw it now, immediately, in full. That money is the principal and all derived income of my premarital property. It has nothing to do with you. Su Qing's pupils contracted almost imperceptibly. She knew which money he was referring to. That fund was registered in his personal name, operating through a complex offshore structure. But as his spouse, she did have a nominal right to know and a certain degree of joint signing authority. This was precisely the rein she had deliberately left when designing that sweet trap, thinking she could keep this horse from running too far. Huh. Su Qing gave a short laugh, a laugh filled with undisguised sarcasm and contempt. Jiang Han, are you negotiating with me? What do you think you'll get by taking that money? That little bit of money is nothing compared to the size of this corporation. You take it, and then what? Rent an apartment, fish every day, and live off the interest for the rest of your life? Are you sure you want to give up the respectability I've given you for that little bit of money? She used the phrase I gave you, deliberately emphasizing her role as the benefactor. Chun Lang chuckled softly behind her, as if he'd heard a joke about someone at their wits' end. Jiang Han didn't respond to her sarcasm, but slowly pulled a folded A4 sheet of paper from his suit pocket. The paper was clean, without creases, clearly well-preserved. He unfolded the paper, turned it around, pushed it across the smooth table, and slid it to Su Qing. This is the notarized document of the prenuptial property disposal authorization you signed separately as part of your sincerity during our premarital agreement. Well, the so-called Comprehensive Protection Agreement. Jiang Han's voice was calm and unhurried, each word as clear as an icicle falling to the ground. Article 5, Section 3 clearly stated, Party B voluntarily relinquishes all joint rights, rights of knowledge, and rights of claim to the initial principal and all subsequent legal interest and investment returns in all accounts and investment vehicles under Party A's name. Party A has the right to unilaterally transfer, invest, or dispose of the funds in any form without Party B's consent or notification. The color drained from Su Qing's face. She abruptly grabbed the paper, her fingertips turning white from the force. The handwriting was indeed hers. She recognized the signature. It was an additional clause she had casually agreed to and signed to quickly coax Jiang Han into signing the prenuptial agreement that seemed to benefit her in every way. She hadn't taken it seriously at the time, even forgetting about it after signing, because she was certain Jiang Han couldn't escape her grasp, certain his money would eventually become their money, and then hers. But now, this forgotten scrap of paper, like a precise scalpel, had been dissected by Jiang Han, piercing through what she thought was an impregnable defense. Su Qing's lips trembled. She crumpled the paper into a ball, then realized it was pointless. The notary office had a copy, and there was an electronic version. Jiang Han, you were prepared all along, weren't you? You've been plotting against me all along. Plotting? Jiang Han repeated the word softly, a faint smile even playing on his lips. Su Qing, between us, who plotted against whom first? You should know better than I do. I'm just protecting what belongs to me. Now, can I sign? He picked up his pen again, facing the resignation letter. Su Qing stared intently at him, her chest heaving. The aroma of coffee now tasted bitter. She wanted to say no, to tear up the agreement. But Chun Lang coughed softly behind her, reminding her that the most important thing now was for Jiang Han to sign and leave, to completely remove him from the company's core decision-making body, compared to the substantial sum, which was merely pocket change compared to the control of the entire group. Getting Jiang Han out of there immediately was the top priority. Sign. Su Qing practically spat out the word through gritted teeth. She picked up the ink pad on the table, pressed it down hard, and threw it in front of Jiang Han. Sign and leave the company building immediately. Your things will be packed and mailed to you. Jiang Han nodded, seemingly oblivious to the hatred in her tone. He wrote his name smoothly and forcefully on the resignation application, then turned the page and signed again in the confirmation section of the job adjustment agreement. The whole process took only a dozen seconds, yet it felt like the curtain slowly being drawn on an era. He gently placed the pen on the table with a crisp click. Then he stood up, straightened his suit jacket, and looked at Su Qing. Su Qing, I have one last piece of advice, he said. You'd better check your computer screen now, or ask the IT department if there's a minor problem with the company's database server. Su Qing froze, then instinctively looked at the monitor connected to the company's intranet on her left. The screen was black, in standby mode. She touched the mouse. The screen lit up, and she froze as if nailed to her chair. The screen wasn't the familiar OA system interface, but a constantly flashing, blood-red countdown, 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Below the countdown was a line of small, continuously scrolling text. Like an endless news flash, Vice President Chun Lang bribed Sunday, a senior director of Tongqing Group, with 20 million renminbi in the bidding for the Xingyao City Complex project, and obtained the bid from a competitor provided by Sunday audio file decoding loading. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The office instantly fell silent, save for the hum of the computer fan. Chun Lang's face turned deathly pale. He lunged at Su Qing from behind, his elbow nearly knocking over the now-cold coffee, staring intently at the screen, his lips moving, but he couldn't utter a single word. Su Qing's mind went blank. She mechanically looked up at Jiang Han, who had reached the door and was gripping the handle. Her voice was dry, like sandpaper scraping. Jiang Han. You. What did you do? Jiang Han didn't turn around. He turned his face, revealing a cold, handsome profile to Su Qing. His voice was soft, yet it clearly pierced the suffocating silence in the office. A New Year's gift. Su Qing. He said he hoped she and her chosen capable assistant would enjoy the surprise. By the way, my legal team will formally submit my restructuring proposal as the largest individual creditor to the board of directors at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you later. The doorknob turned. The door opened a crack, and the cool air from the corridor drifted in. Jiang Han's figure disappeared behind the door, which closed gently with a click, like the gates of fate closing completely. Su Qing lunged at the landline on her desk, her fingers trembling as she pressed the emergency contact button. Chen Lang, still staring at the decreasing countdown on the screen, beads of cold sweat forming on his forehead, suddenly turned to Su Qing and shouted incoherently, "Stop him! Quickly! Stop him! We can't let him leave. That audio is fake. It's synthesized." But his voice was completely drowned out by the terrified report from the IT department head coming through the speakerphone button Su Qing had pressed. President Su. President Su. Our core server has been infected with an advanced encryption worm. All data, including financial, customer, and project documents, is locked. The other party is demanding a key. Otherwise, it will be automatically destroyed in 7 days. President Su. Su Qing slumped into her chair, the receiver slipping from her hand and slamming onto the table with a dull thud. Her vision blurred, her only thought being, that money. She had lost far more than just that small sum. And what Jiang Han just said, 18 billion. She abruptly picked up her phone again, turned on the screen, and the abnormal flow of funds from the bank alerted her like a thunderbolt. Recipient account, Jiang Han. Transfer amount, $18.000.000.000.00. Status, completed. She stared at the countless zeros, then looked up at the relentlessly ticking red countdown on the computer screen, 1 minute and 52 seconds, and finally let out a beast-like scream. Jiang Han. The sound crashed against the cold glass wall, shattering into pieces. The sunlight outside was bright, unable to penetrate the sudden, bone-chilling coldness that had descended upon this office. Su Qing's scream still echoed between the glass walls of the office. Chen Lang had already grabbed the landline on her desk and roared into the terrified IT manager on the other end of the line. Cut off the external network. Immediately cut off all external network connections. Physically disconnect the network. Quickly. His hands were trembling, but the instructions were still clear. As someone with a marketing background, he knew all too well the consequences if that so-called bribery audio recording were to spread. It wasn't a legal issue in the industry. Bribery was an unspoken rule. Getting caught was the fatal flaw. It shut down. The IT manager gasped on the other end of the phone. We immediately cut off all external ports. But Mr. Su, Mr. Chun, that worm, it's self-replicating on the internal network. We shut down one server, and it re-injects from the backup node. Now every department is reporting errors. Even the printers are spitting out gibberish. Su Qing sat in her chair, feeling as if all her bones had been removed. She mechanically raised her hand to wipe her mouth, only to realize she had bitten it, the metallic taste filling her mouth. She snapped back to reality, grabbing her phone from the table, her fingertips white from the force. She swiped through her contacts for a long time before finally finding the name, Jiang Han. She dialed. Beep, beep, beep. Each beep felt like a trampling on her heart. The third beep, and it connected. Hello. Jiang Han's voice came through the receiver. The background noise was quiet, with the faint sound of airport announcements. Su Qing, you called earlier than I expected. Looks like the database's New Year's gift has already been played. Jiang Han. Su Qing's voice was sharp like shards of glass. You're fucking crazy. Do you know what you're doing? That's the company's core data. You're destroying your own hard work. You've worked at this company for 10 years. 12 years. Jiang Han corrected her, his tone as calm as reciting a menu. From a junior project manager to vice president. 12 years. But in these 12 years, I've given 80% of my time to this company every year. And what have I gotten in return? You put Chen Lang into my team, letting him steal my project plans. You constantly undermine my budget approval authority. You're going to celebrate your victory with your lover tonight. And that bottle of champagne was bought with entertainment expenses I signed off on. Hearing this, Chen Lang suddenly turned to look at Su Qing. Su Qing avoided his gaze, her teeth clenching even tighter. You think you can safely leave the country with that 18 billion you withdrew? I've already contacted someone to freeze all your bank accounts. Who did you contact? Jiang Han's voice even carried a hint of amusement. Was it Director Zhao from your company's legal department? Or your college classmate who works in risk control at the bank? Su Qing, I suggest you save your energy. I'm not using the domestic clearing system. I'm using a digital asset channel. Your friend's department doesn't have the authority to do that. And he paused, and Su Qing heard the crisp sound of a lighter being lit on the receiver, followed by the sound of his breath, as if he were smoking. Jiang Han didn't smoke, at least in Su Qing's memory. He had quit 5 years ago. And 5 minutes before you made this call, I officially sent copies of early repayment notices to your company's 3 largest creditor banks through my offshore trust. Jiang Han said slowly. In other words, from now on, the banks will demand immediate repayment of the 9 billion short-term loan on your group's books within the next 48 hours. With your current cash flow, can you even last until next week? Su Qing's mind went blank. That 9 billion yuan short-term loan was something she had taken out last month in the company's name from 3 banks to cover a funding gap for a project within the group. At the time, she thought Jiang Han's proposed repayment plan was too conservative, so she insisted on signing a 1-year repayment term with a very low interest rate. But she knew in her heart that the group's cash flow was already very tight. Relying on Jiang Han's 18 billion yuan asset pool as an implicit guarantee, the banks were willing to lend at low interest rates because of the scale of Jiang Han's stabilizing private assets. Now, she had personally signed away that stabilizing force. You're bluffing me. Su Qing's voice began to waver. Why should the banks listen to you? Who do you think you are? The banks don't care who I am. Jiang Han's tone remained calm. What they cared about was the risk exposure. When your largest private asset backer suddenly withdraws their investment and explicitly informs them that they will no longer provide any form of implicit guarantee to XX Group. Su Qing, you've done due diligence on the banks. You should know what that means. Su Qing jumped up, her chair sliding back half a meter before crashing into the bookshelf with a loud thud. She opened her mouth to say something, but her phone slipped from her sweaty hand and fell to the carpet with a thud. Chen Lang bent down to pick it up and shouted into the receiver, Jiang Han, don't go too far. Come back now, and we can still talk. You can name your terms. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then Jiang Han laughed. It was the first time Chen Lang had heard him laugh like that in the 3 years he'd known him. A contemptuous, confident laugh, like watching ants struggle at his feet. Chen Lang. Jiang Han called him by name, the first time he'd addressed him directly in a conversation. Do you remember last March? The night you invited Mr. Sun from Tongqing Group to dinner to secure the Xingyao City project? You got him 3 bottles of Matai, and he, drunk, gave you his bottom line in the private room. You immediately called me and said, Mr. Jiang, it's done. We won this deal. Chen Lang's pupils constricted. Of course, he remembered that night. That was the most brilliant job he'd done since joining the group. Capitalizing on a drunken slip of the tongue by General Manager Sunday, he and his team precisely negotiated a lower price, ultimately securing the project with a bid 1.8 percentage points lower than the competitors, earning the group nearly 400 million yuan more in gross profit. The board even gave him a special bonus, and Su Qing praised him as a born hunter in front of all the employees at the celebration banquet. But the bill for that meal was paid for with the marketing department's entertainment funds, and he thought only he and General Manager Sun knew about the conversation in that private room. You planted a bug in the private room? Chen Lang's voice distorted. Jiang Han, you insidious. No bug. Jiang Han interrupted him. Your phone was just connected to the Bluetooth speakers in the private room playing background music. I happened to record your call. You were speaking very loudly. Chen Lang. I could hear General Manager Sun shouting, Little Chun, you can really hold your liquor, even through the phone. Chen Lang's face turned completely pale. He glared at Su Qing, who was also looking at him. In that instant their eyes met. It felt as if a fragile alliance was crumbling in the air. Su Qing snatched the phone. Jiang Han, What exactly do you want? You've already taken the money. Are you going to ruin the company too? You get nothing in return. In return? Jiang Han's voice finally turned cold, a chill devoid of any warmth, like the surface of a lake in deep winter. Su Qing, what I want is for you to return everything you took from me, untouched. I want you to rescind all the job reshuffle decisions made today. I want you to publicly admit that Chen Lang is unqualified for the position. And I want you to repay that 37 million yuan personal loan that you embezzled from the company account within 48 hours. Su Qing swayed violently. 37 million yuan. That was a sum she had transferred from the group's account to a shell company 3 months ago under the guise of a reserve fund for new business expansion. Then through 3 accounts before finally ending up in her personal investment account. She thought she had done it flawlessly. The 2 shell companies she handled were registered by Chen Lang. How did you know this? Su Qing's voice finally began to tremble. I have an intern in the finance department. Jiang Han said her name is Xiao Lin. Do you remember? She joined last year through campus recruitment. Her mother was sick and had surgery. And you approved her salary advance application and even gave her an extra half-month of paid leave. She's always remembered your kindness. So when she saw that unusual fund allocation, she couldn't help but call me. Su Qing's vision blurred. Xiao Lin, that quiet girl who always wore black-rimmed glasses. She had indeed given her some extra care, but it was just something she did casually to show her humane management style. A trivial favor. And this trivial favor has now become a precision-guided bomb. Su Qing, we could have ended things amicably. Jiang Han's voice suddenly softened for a moment, carrying a complex emotion that was hard to describe. When you brought up divorce, I originally planned to only take my share of the money and give you the rest. The company, connections, resources, reputation, I'll leave it all to you. But you insisted on making him sit in my seat. Insisted on making Chen Lang sign that agreement over my head. He paused, and Su Qing heard the beeping of the security gate on the other end of the phone. He was going through security. He was about to leave the country. You can insult me. Jiang Han's voice regained its calm. But you can't insult my 12-year career. The position Chen Lang sat in is where I worked my way up from the bottom. Every step was earned with blood and sweat. He can't even beat me. So why should he sit there? The call ended. The busy tone was like the tolling of a judgment bell, striking Su Qing's eardrums again and again. Su Qing stood there, phone in hand, as if nailed to the floor. She slowly turned to look at Chen Lang, finding him looking at her too, his eyes showing something she had never seen before, panic, and a vague, brewing defensiveness. Is he telling the truth? Su Qing's voice was hoarse. You got that Xingyao City project by drinking and getting information out of him? Isn't that the norm? Chen Lang suddenly exploded. He slammed his phone on the sofa, violently loosening his tie. Which bidding process doesn't rely on connections? I fucking won this bid and made you 400 million. How did you praise me back then? You said I was the most astute market manipulator you'd ever seen. Now you're bringing up old grievances? But he said he recorded it. Su Qing raised her voice, taking a step closer to Chen Lang. Recording. If that gets out, if the board sees it, if the media sees it, Chen Lang, you're ruining me. Chen Lang grabbed her wrist tightly, the force making her wince in pain. He lowered his voice. His eyes red. Su Qing, listen to me. I can explain that the audio is fabricated. I can get a technical team to issue an authentication report. But the embezzlement of 37 million, that money went through your account. You signed it. And all the shell companies I handled were registered in your name. Su Qing abruptly shook off his hand, taking 2 steps back, her back slamming against the cold glass curtain wall, looking at the man who had just stood beside her, his hand on the back of her chair in a triumphant gesture. She suddenly felt he was a different person. His handsome face was still the same, but the look in his eyes had changed, from a docile hound to a wolf ready to bite at any moment. What do you mean? Su Qing's voice lowered, carrying a dangerous undertone. You want to distance yourself? I'm not distancing myself. Chen Lang raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the gesture was full of cunning. I mean, now is not the time for us to fight. Jiang Han's target is you. He hates you. I'm just a tool. As long as you keep the board in check and prevent that audio recording from spreading, I'll find a way to communicate with President Sun and get him to issue a written clarification, saying that the meal was a normal business exchange and no bids were revealed. if he's willing to provide that proof. That recording is just a piece of paper. Su Qing stared at him, her mind racing. Chen Lang made sense. But she also realized something even more terrifying. Chen Lang held evidence of her embezzlement, while she held evidence of his bribery. Now both pieces of evidence were in Jiang Han's hands. If Jiang Han detonated both simultaneously, they would both perish. But what if Jiang Han only detonated one? She looked at Chen Lang and suddenly smiled. A smile that sent chills down Chen Lang's spine. Chen Lang. Su Qing slowly walked back to her desk, picked up the completely cold cup of coffee, took a sip. It was so bitter she didn't even flinch. You'd better pray Jiang Han is just bluffing. Because if he really sends that audio to the board, I'll audit every project you've handled. I won't cover up a single instance of your embezzlement of marketing funds, falsified activity budgets, or kickbacks. Chen Lang's face changed. Su Qing. You, darling. Su Qing put down her coffee cup, the bottom hitting the table with a thud. You're right. We can't fight now. But remember, with me, you'll always be a pawn. Jiang Han is the one who ran away in my game, so you should be an even better pawn. She picked up the landline on the table and dialed the board secretary's number. The moment the call connected, her voice regained its professional calm. Secretary Li, notify all directors in the city to hold an emergency conference call at 8 p.m. tonight. The topics are the company's core database suffering an unknown cyber attack, and the abnormal transfer of assets by former Vice President Jiang Han. She hung up the phone and looked at Chen Lang. Chen Lang stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her, his shoulders trembling slightly. The setting sun outside the window dyed the entire city blood red, and he stood in that red light, like a melting human sculpture. Su Qing's fingers tapped lightly on the table. Once, twice, 3 times. She was counting the time. There were still 47 hours until the 48 hours Jiang Han mentioned, and 6 days and 21 hours until the database was automatically destroyed. She had to find every possible way to turn things around within this time. First, she had to stabilize the bank. Second, she had to find Jiang Han. Finally, she had to confirm one thing. Where was that intern? Shaolin. She dialed the HR department's internal line, checked the file of Lin Xiao, the finance department intern, her home address, contact information, and all other information. Send it to my personal email within 10 minutes. The call ended. Su Qing looked down at her slightly trembling fingers, then clenched them into a fist. Her nails dug into her palm, the pain bringing her back to her senses. She looked up through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the gradually brightening city lights and whispered a sentence to herself, and also to the man she once thought she had him in her grasp, now soaring 10,000 meters in the sky. Jiang Han, you think you've won? This family, this company, I built it all from scratch by myself. You're just a professional manager I hired. Don't get your position wrong. Unbeknownst to her, at this very moment, Jiang Han was sitting in first class on a flight to Singapore. Before turning off his phone, he sent an email with only a subject line to an encrypted email address. The subject line was 3 words, Step 2. Meanwhile, downstairs at the group's building, a young woman wearing black-rimmed glasses was carrying a cardboard box, leaving through a side door. The cardboard box contained several notebooks, a succulent plant, and a work badge with Lin Xiao's name on it. She walked out the door, glanced back at the brightly lit skyscraper, then took out her phone and sent a text message to an unlisted number. Withdrawn. As you said, all the photocopies and records have been taken out. The phone vibrated quickly, the reply consisting of only 2 words, received. Next, stay at the hotel next to your mother's hospital. 3 months' room fees have been paid. The room number will be sent to your new phone. Lin Xiao took a deep breath, turned off her old phone, removed the SIM card, broke it in half, and threw it into the roadside drain. She turned and got into a taxi, the building in the rearview mirror receding further and further away until it became a blurry dot. Meanwhile, Su Qing was still in her office, going through Lin Xiao's file. Unbeknownst to her, the phone number listed as the emergency contact in the file was no longer in service. At 8 o'clock that evening, Su Qing sat in her study, 3 laptops and 2 cell phones in front of her. The study door was locked, but through the solid wood door, she could still hear Chen Lang pacing back and forth in the living room, his leather shoes clicking impatiently on the marble floor. She chose to hold the meeting in the study, not the office. The office was locked down by the IT department. All internet devices were physically isolated, and even her own office computer had been taken away by technicians for data mirroring. The moment the emergency board conference call connected successfully, the images of 7 independent directors and 3 executive directors appeared on the screen. Most of them looked grave, except for one older director surnamed Zhou, who was also an old comrade of Su Qing's father, who gave her an encouraging nod. Distinguished directors, I know time is tight tonight, so I'll get to the point. Su Qing adjusted her headset. Her voice was clear and strong. This afternoon, a malicious cyber attack occurred targeting the group's core database. The attackers used internal privileges to implant an encrypted worm, causing all business systems to grind to a halt. The technical team is working hard to restore data and expects to unblock the data within 48 hours. 48 hours? A young director wearing gold-rimmed glasses interrupted her on the screen. President Su, I received calls this afternoon from 3 partners saying that our project progress payment system has completely crashed, and their finance departments are pressing us for payment. Who will bear the damage to our reputation in the next 48 hours? I've already sent people to coordinate, and I will issue a written apology and explanation to all partners. Su Qing's fingers clenched under the table, but her tone remained calm. I believe you've all heard about the source of this attack. It was the former vice president, Jiang Han. He used internal authorization obtained during his tenure to implant a backdoor program, which was activated 10 minutes before his departure. Where's the evidence? Another director pressed, his voice clearly displeased. President Su, many of us felt rushed when we received the notification of your decision to promote Chen Lang to replace Jiang Han. Jiang Han has been with the company for 12 years, and his performance is undeniable. You gave us only one day to vote. The resolution was issued at 3 p.m. this afternoon, and it took effect at 5 p.m., less than half an hour after taking effect. The database crashed. What are you expecting us to think? Su Qing's temples throbbed. She took a deep breath regarding Jiang Han's issue. I've already contacted the legal team and formally submitted accusations of asset irregularities and theft of trade secrets to the relevant authorities. As for Chen Lang's promotion, Chen Lang's market performance data is public. Last year, he brought 3 times the profit increase to the company compared to Jiang Han. One is living off past achievements. The other is building an empire. This choice isn't difficult. Living off past achievements? The previously silent director, Zhou, finally spoke. His voice slow but heavy. Su Qing, before your father passed away, he told me that you're young and ambitious, and asked me to look after you. As for Jiang Han, I watched him rise to prominence. His overseas projects, the initial investments, the network he built, these weren't immediate returns, but their long-term impact is significant. You're removing him, and at this particular time. Director Zhou didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. Su Qing understood, and so did the other directors. A brief silence fell over the screen, broken only by the crackling of electricity. Like a snake lurking in the shadows, Su Qing abruptly stood up, walked around the desk to the window. With her back to the camera, she lowered her voice. Everyone, things have come to this point. Let's address the immediate issues. I propose the following. First, urgently activate the backup disaster recovery system to gradually restore core business data from the cloud backup, although this will result in the loss of incremental data from the last 48 hours. The main framework will remain operational. Second, regarding the bank's early repayment notices, I will personally meet with the presidents of the 3 banks first thing tomorrow morning to negotiate for an extension. Third, she paused, then uttered a sentence that made even her heart race. Third, I suggest initiating a comprehensive audit of all of Jiang Han's past projects to investigate whether there was any data falsification, embezzlement, or other misconduct. If verified, we can not only recover the transferred assets, but also pursue his criminal liability for commercial crimes. You mean? The director with the gold-rimmed glasses seemed thoughtful, turning all the blame towards Jiang Han, characterizing the attack as a malicious retaliation by him against the company, thus downplaying the responsibility for management's decision-making errors. It was a shift in focus. Su Qing turned around, her gaze sweeping across every face on the screen. also presenting the outside world with a unified and credible version of the story. Jiang Han was the traitor. We were the victims. And Chun Lang was the hero who took over in a time of crisis. This narrative, while putting short-term pressure on the stock price, would stabilize investor confidence in the long run. The directors fell silent again. Old Joe took off his glasses on the other end of the screen, wiped them, and then put them back on. Su Qing, are you sure you want to go this far? Jiang Han was your husband after all. Doing this is tantamount to pushing him to the brink. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered. He bit me first. Su Qing's voice suddenly turned cold. Even she herself could hear the ruthlessness in that instant. Uncle Joe, I signed the divorce agreement. He took 18 billion, and then he bombed our servers. Now he's forced me to this point. Suddenly, there was a knock on the conference room door, 3 rapid knocks. Su Qing frowned and called out, "Who is it?" "It's me," Chun Lang's voice, suppressed like the calm before a volcanic eruption, said, "Something's happened. Come out for a moment." Su Qing gestured for him to wait a moment, took off her headset, and walked to the door, opening it a crack. Chun Lang stood in the doorway, his face ashen. His phone screen was lit up, displaying an email from an anonymous forwarder. She took the phone, looked down, and her pupils constricted sharply. It was a scanned copy of a letter, addressed to a prestigious international law firm. The content was concise. On behalf of Mr. Jiang Han, I hereby formally notify the board of directors of XX Group and Ms. Su Qing that I have today sent, through encrypted channels, the complete chain of evidence regarding Mr. Chun Lang's alleged commercial bribery in the bidding for the Xingyao City project and Ms. Su Qing's alleged embezzlement of company funds. Please check the attachment. Su Qing's fingers slid stiffly upwards. At the bottom of the screen, a compressed file lay quietly. Its file name and date, March 17, 2025. That was the day Chun Lang treated President Sun to dinner. She abruptly looked up at Chun Lang. "You received this?" All the directors received it. Chun Lang's voice was low, but that suppressed roar was more terrifying than a shout. "I received a call from Old Joe a minute ago. He asked me what that audio was about. He said he doesn't look at compressed files and asked me to explain." Su Qing, Jiang Han really sent it. Su Qing's brain felt like it had been hit by a hammer. She turned and rushed back to her desk, grabbed her headset, and put it on. Her voice urgent. "Directors. Emergency. I just learned that someone has sent anonymous emails containing false information in my name. Please do not open any attachments. Those files are fabricated. It's false evidence maliciously created by Jiang Han to retaliate against me." Old Joe's face on the screen did not disappear. He silently looked at her, his eyes behind his reading glasses carrying a complex, almost pitying expression. "Su Qing." Old Joe spoke slowly. "I've opened it." Su Qing froze. "I don't understand technology, but I understand signatures." Old Joe picked up a piece of paper and waved it at the camera. "Back when you were a financial assistant for your father's group, this was the handwriting you used to sign expense reports. The Sun radical in the character Qing was always tilted 5 degrees to the upper right, unchanged for 20 years. The signature on that approval form for embezzling 37 million was yours. I'm not stupid." Su Qing. Su Qing's lips moved, but no sound came out. The other directors on the screen exchanged glances. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was the first to ask, "Old Joe, what did you see?" Old Joe put down the paper and sighed. "I suggest everyone check their emails immediately. After you've looked at them, we can discuss tonight's topic from how to recover the data to how to rebuild the management team." A commotion erupted on the screen. The directors all looked down at their phones or tablets, their expressions changing in sequence within seconds: confusion, shock, anger, and finally, a uniform indifference. When the director with the gold-rimmed glasses looked up again, his gaze towards Su Qing was no longer scrutinizing as it had been an hour ago, but rather a distant, businesslike detachment. "President Su," he began, using the title President Su, but his tone lacked any hint of subordinate to superior. "Regarding your third resolution, a comprehensive audit of Jiang Han, I propose a change to a comprehensive audit of all financial transactions of the current management team, including you and Chun Lang." Su Qing slammed her hand on the table. "You're taking advantage of my misfortune. You believed everything Jiang Han sent without even conducting a technical assessment? That's why we need an audit." Another director chimed in. "The truth will out. and lies will become truth. President Su, if you have no connection to the embezzlement, the audit will clear your name. But until then, I believe you are no longer suitable to chair tonight's meeting and the subsequent emergency response. Who will chair? Su Qing's voice was almost accusatory. She knew she was losing control of the meeting, but her body's stress response wouldn't stop her. Who are you going to bring in? Jiang Han is gone. Chen Lang is now my only. Bring Jiang Han back. Old Zhou's voice was soft, but every word pierced Su Qing's eardrums like nails. He had attached a video link to the email, which I clicked on. In the video, he said that if the board was willing to revoke this afternoon's personnel adjustment resolution within 48 hours and publicly declare Chen Lang's appointment invalid, he was willing to provide the database decryption key and personally continue to provide the company with 3 months of bridge financing guarantees. Su Qing's nails dug into the flesh of her palms, the stinging pain shooting up her nerves to the back of her head. She opened her mouth to say it was his conspiracy, but the words stuck in her throat. In the director's eyes, between a former vice president who could save the company and a current chairman who was under audit, whose choice was more rational was self-evident. The meeting is adjourned for now, Old Zhou announced, his voice finally carrying an unquestionable authority. All directors, please digest the information. The meeting will be held tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in person. Su Qing, Chen Lang, you both must attend. Is Chen Lang online? Su Qing turned to look at the study doorway. Chen Lang had opened it some time earlier, leaning against the doorframe. His phone screen lit up with the same email interface. He looked up, meeting Su Qing's gaze. The air between them felt heavy. I'm here, Chen Lang said into the microphone on Su Qing's desk, his voice hoarse. Chen Lang. Old Zhou's voice turned stern. I'll arrange for a professional agency to conduct voice-print analysis on your audio file. If it's a false accusation, the board will clear your name. But if it's true, you'll not only face administrative dismissal, but also the real accusations implied by the false document you mentioned. Chen Lang's shoulders jerked. He looked at Su Qing. Something in his eyes completely changed, a look Su Qing had never seen in any man's eyes before, a desperate, ruthless resolve tinged with despair. The conference call ended. The screens went black one by one, until only Old Zhou's image remained. He looked at Su Qing. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately he just shook his head, and the image disappeared. The study was eerily quiet. The radiator creaked softly, and the city lights outside cast long, distorted shadows of the two people. Su Qing. Chen Lang spoke first, his voice low and husky. Let's talk. Talk about what? Su Qing leaned against the desk, arms crossed, adopting a defensive posture. Talk about how you betrayed me at the board meeting to save your own life? Chen Lang took 2 steps closer, stopping 3 steps in front of her. He didn't come any closer, but the look in his eyes sent a chill down Su Qing's spine, the look of a cornered beast, calculating both escape and counterattack. Jiang Han's email to me included more than just that recording. Chen Lang said slowly, a copy of your transfer records, the 37 million, from the group account to the first shell company, to your personal investment account, with bank transaction screenshots throughout. Su Qing, that thing is in my hands, and also in the hands of all the directors. If the audit starts tomorrow, you'll be the first to fall. What do you want to say? Su Qing's chin lifted slightly, but her fingers unconsciously tightened on her arm. Chen Lang suddenly laughed, a twisted and ferocious smile. I want to say, if one of us is destined to die, Su Qing, you deserve to die more than I do. That 37 million was your signature. When you asked me to register the shell company, you clearly said it was for temporary cash flow, to be paid back in 2 months. You didn't. You used that money to cover the margin of that real estate trust you invested in overseas. Didn't you? You think I didn't know? Su Qing's face completely changed. You've been tracking my investments? You use your mother's birthday for all your passwords. You can't even be bothered to change them. Chen Lang sneered. Su Qing, do you really think I love you? I slept with you. I helped you suppress Jiang Han. I helped you sign documents and process accounts. What do you think I'm after? Your face? You're 7 years older than me. These words were like a knife, stabbing straight into Su Qing's heart. She suddenly raised her hand and slapped Chen Lang across the face, the crisp sound echoing throughout the study. Chen Lang's head was knocked to the side, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. but he didn't cover his face. Instead, he turned around, his laughter growing even more unrestrained. "Good slap," he said. "This slap, plus the 37 million you embezzled, is enough for the board to jointly remove you from your position at tomorrow's audit meeting." "Su Qing, have you ever thought about where I was when you were in jail?" Su Qing trembled, looking at the face before her, once so tender and affectionate, constantly sending her good morning and good night messages. She suddenly felt utterly alienated. She remembered Jiang Han, the glass of warm water he poured for her every morning, the years when he would quietly come home late from work so as not to wake her. Back then, she thought Jiang Han was boring, dull, and unpassionate. Chen Lang's appearance was like a raging fire, burning her until she was dizzy. Now the fire was extinguished, leaving only ashes and scorched earth. "Get out now." Su Qing pointed to the study door, her finger trembling. "Get out of my house immediately. Say whatever you want at the board meeting tomorrow. I have lawyers. I don't believe a gigolo like you who climbed to the top because of me can bring me down." Chen Lang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, gave her one last look, and turned to walk towards the door. He stopped at the door, without turning back, and only said one sentence. "Su Qing, you'd better not sleep too soundly tonight. Think about how Jiang Han endured 12 years of being sidelined. And then think about the 3 years you and I shared. Who do you think you chose wrong?" The door closed. The footsteps faded away. And then the apartment door slammed shut. Su Qing stood alone in the study, surrounded by black computer screens, each reflecting her own distorted face. She slowly slid down to the floor, leaning against the desk leg. The cold marble floor seeped through her pajamas, and she shivered. Her phone screen lit up with a new message from Jiang Han. He had changed his number to a new international number. The message contained only one line. "Su Qing, you can take everything back. The condition is, at tomorrow's board meeting, publicly admit that everything between you and me was your scheme first. If you admit it, I'll back off." Su Qing stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen for a long time. She typed "You're dreaming," then deleted it. She typed "Let's talk," then deleted it. Finally, she turned off her phone, buried her head in her knees, and only her own rapid breathing could be heard in the darkness. Meanwhile, in a penthouse suite in a Singapore hotel, Jiang Han sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. He looked at the read notification on his phone screen, his lips devoid of a smile, only a weary calm. He sent a message to another number. She didn't reply. "Tomorrow. Proceed as planned." A quick reply came. "Received. Chen Lang has left her place and is heading towards the airport. Should I stop him?" Jiang Han thought for a moment and typed 2 words. "No need. Let him go. He won't go far." He put down his phone. Outside the window, a cargo ship was slowly leaving the port, its horn carrying through the night, deep and lingering. He closed his eyes, and 12 years of memories flashed before him, finally settling on the signature line of the divorce agreement. The moment the pen touched the paper, he knew some things could never be the same again. Su Qing sat on the floor for a full 40 minutes, until her lower back protested with a throbbing pain. Only then did she slowly stand up, supporting herself on the desk leg. Her knees made a soft cracking sound, as if her body was reminding her that she was no longer at the age where she could work all night and still be energetic enough to present a proposal the next day. She went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of cold water, and gulped it down. The icy liquid slid down her esophagus and into her stomach, sending a shiver down her spine. She glanced at the wall clock. 9:23 p.m. 11 hours and 37 minutes until the board meeting at 9 a.m. the next morning. She picked up her phone, unlocked it again, and Jiang Han's message was still on the screen. Her thumb hovered above the input box. "Typing you win. I concede," then deleted it word by word. What did conceding mean? It meant publicly admitting to plotting against her husband. It meant she had personally trampled her business reputation into the mud. It meant she would become a laughingstock in the city's business circles from now on. She closed the chat window, opened her contacts, and dialed an unsaved number. It rang 5 times before being answered, and a deep male voice came from the other end. "So late. Miss Su? Attorney Ma, I need you to draft an emergency statement immediately." Su Qing's voice regained its familiar crispness, typical of her business negotiations. The statement was a public condemnation, issued on her behalf and in the name of the board of directors. regarding the actions of the company's former vice president, Jiang Han, who maliciously attacked the company's database, stole trade secrets, and transferred a huge sum of money this afternoon, and requested relevant agencies to launch an investigation. There was a 2-second silence on the other end of the line. Then Attorney Ma slowly said, "Ms. Su, I heard about this afternoon, but I need to remind you that, based on your description, the funds Jiang Han transferred are supported by a prenuptial agreement authorizing the independent disposal of marital property, making legal recovery extremely difficult. As for the database attack, without a clear technical report proving he planted the backdoor, the coincidence alone is insufficient to constitute a valid charge. I don't care what methods you use." Su Qing's voice rose a notch. "I need a legal document that I can present at the board meeting tomorrow morning. One that looks legitimate. As the group's long-term legal counsel, anything you send out will at least be treated as professional advice by the board." Attorney Ma sighed on the other end of the phone. "President Su, can I tell you the truth? Speak. If your case goes through public proceedings, Jiang Han's prenuptial agreement authorizing the disposal of marital property is completely legal. The 37 million you misappropriated is irrefutable evidence, and the recording of Chun Lang's bribery, if confirmed by voiceprint analysis, is also irrefutable evidence. As a lawyer, I don't recommend a counteroffensive strategy, because your defenses are all made of paper. The only thing you can do now is to reach a private settlement with Jiang Han, make him withdraw all the materials, and you return the misappropriated funds, so that both sides can end things amicably." Su Qing's fingers clenched the phone case tightly, the plastic edge digging into her palm. "I called him, but he didn't answer. He changed his number. He told me to publicly admit my mistake at the board meeting tomorrow, saying that as long as I admit that I schemed against him first, he will stop." "Okay, I'll admit it." Attorney Ma's voice was more like an order than a suggestion. "President Su, do you know that once this material is publicly discussed at the board meeting, you will face not only dismissal but also potential civil claims if you can't repay the 37 million within 48 hours. Once the company's internal audit report is submitted, even I, as a lawyer, may not be able to handle the subsequent events. You want me to admit in front of everyone that I'm a woman who schemed against her own husband?" "President Su," Attorney Ma's voice deepened, "do you think that if you don't admit it, others won't know? When you and Qin Lang were seen together in the company, all 3,000 employees in the entire group were talking about it. Jiang Han was the last to know, or rather, the last to speak out. Now you vehemently deny that you schemed against him. Ask yourself if you believe it." After the call ended, Su Qing stood there, listening to the dial tone, feeling as if the last bone had been removed from her body. She slowly walked to the French windows in the living room, her forehead pressed against the cold glass, watching the endless stream of car lights below form a golden river. This city wouldn't stop for her even for a second, and the position she had spent 20 years climbing was crumbling beneath her feet at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. She suddenly remembered a night 10 years ago. It was the second year of her marriage to Jiang Han, and the company was still in its early stages. To secure a crucial order, she drank until she suffered a stomach hemorrhage and was hospitalized. Jiang Han stayed by her bedside all night. When she woke up the next morning, he was asleep beside her, still clutching the unfinished bid she had prepared. She reached out and touched his hair. He woke with a start, his first words being, "I've finished revising the bid for you. Go back to sleep." At that time, she thought this man was truly wonderful, steadfast, reliable, and never going to betray her. Later, as she rose higher and higher, seeing more and more people fawning over her, Jiang Han's existence became a dull, taken for granted backdrop. When Qin Lang appeared, she was overwhelmed by that destructive, forbidden passion. She told herself it was just a game, that Jiang Han wouldn't know, and even if he did, it wouldn't matter. She was wrong. He knew everything. He knew from beginning to end. He was just waiting for her to make her move. Her phone suddenly vibrated, and an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Su Qing's heart tightened. She answered, "Hello? President Su." A young woman's voice came from the other end, deliberately calm. "This is Lin Xiao." Su Qing's fingers tightened around the phone. "Lin Xiao? Where are you now? Do you know how many confidential company documents you've taken? Your actions constitute commercial espionage, and I can pursue legal action against you, President Su. Please listen to me first. Lin Xiao interrupted her, her voice soft but steady. I didn't call to argue. President Jiang asked me to tell you something. At tomorrow's board meeting, he only needs you to publicly acknowledge your relationship with Chun Lang and your systematic suppression of President Jiang during his tenure. After that, he will withdraw his separate report against you for embezzling company funds. But if you choose to deny it to the end, he will submit the complete chain of evidence directly to the auditing firm. And then it won't be an internal matter for the board of directors anymore. Su Qing gritted her teeth. He asked you to pass on the message? Why didn't he call me himself? President Jiang said he sent you a message, but you didn't reply. He felt that you were emotionally unstable right now, and that it might be more calm for me to do it. Lin Xiao paused, a very faint hesitation flashing in her voice. President Su, I actually didn't want to do this. You've been kind to me before. When my mother had surgery, you approved her leave and even gave her an advance on her salary. I've always remembered that. But when I handed those materials to President Jiang, I read the contents. What did you read? Su Qing's voice was as cold as ice. I read the entire transaction record of your embezzlement of that money. Lin Xiao said, the day after you transferred $37 million from the group's account, you gave all the colleagues in the finance department a team-building bonus, and each person received an extra month's salary. I thought it was because you were considerate of everyone, but now I know it was hush money. Su Qing suddenly closed her eyes. She remembered. After transferring that money, she did indeed do this, giving everyone in the finance and audit departments an extra month's salary under the guise of a performance bonus for exceeding the first half of the year's targets. She thought it was standard practice to avoid arousing suspicion among the finance staff. Everyone in that circle did it, and no one would find it strange. But she forgot that Lin Xiao was a recent graduate and intern. For an intern, a sudden extra month's salary was enough to make her remember this for a lifetime. Lin Xiao. Su Qing's voice softened, adopting a more sincere tone. Listen to me. You were used by Jiang Han. He's just getting revenge on me. You're a tool in his hands. If you come back now, I promise I won't pursue the matter of you taking the documents. Your position will be retained, and your salary will be doubled. How about it? There was a 5-second silence on the other end of the phone. Then Lin Xiao laughed. A soft laugh carrying a clarity beyond her years that Su Qing had never expected. President Su, you and Chun Lang have been together for 3 years, and President Jiang has never once spoken ill of you two in the company. He only came to me on the day you asked him to sign the resignation agreement, saying, Shaolin, give me a copy of what you saw, and you can decide for yourself whether to give it to me or not. He didn't even urge me. He waited for me for 3 days. I gave it to him. Lin Zhao's voice remained calm because after reviewing your transfer records, I also checked the project expense report for this quarter. The actual execution cost of the Xingyao City project handled by Chun Lang was nearly 20 million more than what he reported, and the whereabouts of the difference were unknown. President Su, how can I believe you are a leader worth following? The phone call ended. Su Qing stood in the dark living room, holding her phone. The lights from the building across the street reflected on her face. Flickering, she slowly squatted down, squatting in front of the French windows, burying her face in her knees, her shoulders shaking violently. She cried, but she only cried for 3 minutes. 3 minutes later, she suddenly raised her head and wiped her face hard with her sleeve. She stood up, went into the bathroom, and splashed cold water around her eyes. In the mirror, she saw a pair of eyes that were bloodshot but had regained their sharpness. She picked up her phone and sent a voice message to Attorney Ma. No need to prepare the legal statement for tomorrow's board meeting. What I need is another document, a self-inspection report on major matters that I, as the group's chairman, will submit to the board in my personal capacity, including a voluntary application to submit all my financial approval records during my tenure. I want to be the one to confess before Jiang Han. After sending the message, she dialed another number, this time to old Zhou, her father's old comrade in arms and the only one who showed her pity at the meeting that evening. Old Zhou answered the phone faster than she expected, as if he had been waiting for her. Su Qing, you finally called. Uncle Zhou. Su Qing's voice was hoarse with a sense of relief. Before the board meeting starts tomorrow, I'd like to see you alone. I have something to show you, and something to confess to you. Old Zhou was silent for a moment, then said one word. Okay. 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. At my house. Come alone. Don't bring anyone. Su Qing hung up the phone, feeling as if all her strength had been drained. But she stood still. She gripped the edge of the sink, looking at the haggard yet defiant woman in the mirror, and spoke to herself, word by word. Jiang Han, you want me to admit my mistake in public, right? Fine, I'll admit it. But after I admit it, what can you use to pressure me? All I need to do is confess, return the goods, and resign as chairman. You'll be the heartless person who forced your ex-wife out of office. Public opinion won't be on your side. Su Qing isn't stupid. What she didn't know was that at this very moment, Jiang Han was video chatting with someone in a hotel in Singapore. On the other end of the screen was an elderly woman with gray hair, wearing a cotton-padded coat, sitting in the living room of an ordinary apartment. A bowl of untouched wonton sat on the coffee table in front of her. Mom. Jiang Han's voice was gentler than ever before. Is everything all right on your end? I'm fine. The old woman smiled and waved her hand. I've kept all the things you sent. If that girl Su Qing really dares to come and cause trouble, I'll play those recordings for her. Don't worry. Your mother may be old, but my mind isn't senile. Jiang Han smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Mom. Remember, no matter who comes to ask where I am, just say you don't know. Also, if Su Qing comes in person, turn on the recording function on your phone. Okay. The old lady picked up her wonton bowl and took a sip of soup. Xiaohan, take good care of yourself out there. Come back when you've dealt with Su Qing's matter, and Mom will make you dumplings. After the screen went dark, Jiang Han walked to the window, looking at the brightly lit Singapore night view. He knew Su Qing would definitely go to Old Zhou, and she would definitely choose to confess, because that was the last bit of pride in her character, rather than being beaten into submission. She'd rather walk down with dignity. But he had only ever given her one path. Whichever she chose, the destination was the same. He picked up another phone and dialed a number. Send the second set of materials to Old Zhou half an hour before the board meeting tomorrow. Yes, the complete record of Chun Lang's financial transactions with his friend. Don't forget to CC Su Qing. She needs to know that Chun Lang pocketed 40% of the money she transferred from the shell company. The person on the other end of the phone responded. Jiang Han hung up the phone, placed it on the table, and it clicked softly. The sea breeze blew in from the window, and he closed his eyes. After tomorrow, the building he had helped build would collapse before everyone's eyes. But he didn't care anymore, because from the moment Su Qing slammed the divorce papers in front of him, that building was no longer his home. It was just a hollowed-out shell, and what he had to do now was to tear it down himself and build his own building on the ruins. At 6:40 a.m., Su Qing changed into a navy blue business suit, her makeup so perfect that there was no sign of her staying up all night. She checked herself one last time in the entryway mirror, making sure all the tear stains were covered by concealer. Before picking up her bag and leaving, she called Chun Lang 3 times as the elevator descended, but he hung up on her every time. She glanced at the busy signal on the screen, gave a cold laugh, and tossed her phone back into her bag. At 7 o'clock sharp, she arrived at Old Zhou's door. It was a penthouse duplex in an old-style high-rise apartment building. Her father had been there countless times when he was alive. He could find the elevator buttons with his eyes closed. After the doorbell rang, Old Zhou opened the door himself. He was wearing a navy blue cardigan and holding a pair of reading glasses, clearly having been interrupted from his morning reading. Come in. Old Zhou stepped aside, saying there was porridge in the kitchen. Have a bowl first. Uncle Zhou, I'm not hungry. Su Qing changed into slippers and went inside. A stack of documents lay on the sofa in the living room. She immediately recognized them as the contents of last night's email. Printed out, she sat down, not touching the papers, but instead taking a report from her bag, wrapped in a transparent document bag, and handing it to Old Zhou with both hands. This is my self-inspection report on major personal matters, which I finished at 4 o'clock this morning. Su Qing's voice was calm, containing details of all financial approvals I had signed during my tenure, as well as a full account of my personal embezzlement of 37 million yuan from the group. I am willing to formally submit this report at today's board meeting and promise to return the full amount involved within 48 hours. Old Zhou didn't take the document. He stood in front of the coffee table, looking down at Su Qing for a long while, a complex mix of emotions churning in his eyes, like the mixture of heartache and disappointment an elder feels when watching a younger person finally apologize after making a mistake. Su Qing, he spoke, his voice deeper than on the phone last night. Do you know that half an hour before your call last night, I received something else? Su Qing's hand paused slightly. What is it? Old Joe bent down and picked up a tablet from the low cabinet beside the sofa, unlocked it, and handed it to Su Qing. Take a look for yourself. Su Qing took it. The screen displayed several screenshots of bank transfer records. The first screenshot shows the account statement of an overseas shell company, indicating that 8 million yuan was transferred from a digital wallet. The second screenshot, taken on the same day, shows that 3,200,000 yuan of that 8 million yuan was transferred to another account within half an hour, the account name being Chun Lang's full pinyin spelling. This is... Su Qing's voice began to waver. This is the portion Chun Lang kept after transferring the 37 million yuan from your shell company. Old Joe sat down, his voice heavy with weariness. Last night, before you called me, an anonymous number sent me this. I couldn't verify its authenticity, but the sender included a message saying that if you confess to embezzling public funds at today's board meeting, please bring out this screenshot to prove that the money wasn't embezzled by you alone. Su Qing suddenly looked up. Uncle Joe, this screenshot might be forged by Jiang Han. Since he can synthesize audio, he can also forge bank records. I've thought so too. Old Joe nodded. So this morning at 6 o'clock, I called my old classmate who's the general manager of the risk control department in the banking system and asked him to check the inflow and outflow of all of Chun Lang's accounts over the past 6 months. He just replied, saying that Chun Lang did indeed have a deposit of 3.2 million yuan 3 months ago from a trading company registered in the Cayman Islands, and the registered legal representative of this trading company. Old Joe paused, looking into Su Qing's eyes. It was the intermediary you used who registered it for you. Su Qing, your shell company and the shell company Chun Lang used to embezzle funds were handled by the same intermediary. The air in the living room seemed to freeze. The tablet in Su Qing's hand trembled slightly, and the self-inspection report on her lap felt like a hot piece of iron. She wanted to say that she didn't know about this, but the words sounded weak and powerless. Chun Lang did help her register a shell company. She gave him all the documents at the time, and he said he would find a reliable intermediary to handle everything. She never asked about the details again. Now, those details have become a net, tightly binding her and Chun Lang together, the last end of the knot held in Jiang Han's hand. Uncle Joe, Su Qing said, putting down her tablet, her voice hoarse. Do you think there's still a chance for things to turn around at today's board meeting? Old Joe looked at her silently for a long time, then slowly said, Su Qing, your father told me something before he passed away. He said his greatest achievement was raising you into someone capable of standing on your own. And his biggest regret was not teaching you the meaning of stopping. Today, you're sitting in front of me, voluntarily submitting a self-examination report and admitting to embezzling public funds. This shows you're still your father's daughter, and you have the backbone to take responsibility. He stood up, walked to Su Qing, picked up the self-examination report, flipped through it, and then gently placed it back on the coffee table. But you were indeed tricked by Chun Lang, whether you knew about the 3.2 million he embezzled or not. Legally, as the first person to handle it, you can't escape responsibility. I have a suggestion for you. At today's board meeting, while confessing to embezzling public funds, also mention Chun Lang's embezzlement of funds, and voluntarily submit all the materials to the board for filing. The advantage of doing this is that you've gone from being the main culprit to a deceived victim, and the board's punishment will be much lighter. Su Qing looked up at Old Joe, her lips moving slightly. What about Jiang Han? His demand is that I publicly admit that I schemed against him first. Admit it. Old Joe interrupted her. You don't need to change a single word. Just admit whatever he says. Su Qing, what do you think you'll gain by stubbornly denying it? The board members aren't stupid. The whole group knows about you and Chun Lang. The more you deny it, the more they'll think you're hypocritical. If you admit it cleanly and conscientiously, lowering your stance, you can actually preserve your last bit of dignity. Su Qing closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, the thin, fragile mist in her eyes had dissipated. She stood up and bowed to Old Joe. Uncle Joe, thank you. I'll remember. When she left Old Joe's house, the sunlight outside made her squint. She got into her car and started the engine, suddenly noticing 2 unread messages on her phone. The first one was from Chun Lang. containing only 3 words: "You're finished." The second message came from an unknown number. There was no text, only an attachment with a file name consisting of a date. She opened the attachment. Inside was a consulting agreement Chen Lang had privately signed with a competitor. The agreement amounted to exactly 3.2 million yuan, and the signing date was the same day the money was transferred to his account. At the end of the attachment was a small note: President Su, the person you chose had already taken the competitor's money a week before you signed the transfer. You not only chose the wrong lover, you also chose someone who will drag you down with them. Su Qing's hand gripping the steering wheel trembled violently. She slammed her fist on the steering wheel, the horn blaring a short, piercing honk that startled a stray cat into the bushes. She slumped over the steering wheel, panting heavily. It took her a full 2 minutes to look up at her face in the rearview mirror. Her makeup was smudged. Lipstick had smeared on her lips, making her look like a disheveled clown. She touched up her makeup, applied her lipstick, smoothed out the wrinkles in her collar, and then started the car and drove towards the company. All the way there, only one thought occupied her mind. Chen Lang, you'd better not come to the board meeting today. If you do, I'll make sure you walk in standing and leave sideways. At 8:50 a.m., Su Qing entered the board meeting room on the top floor of the group. 7 people were already seated at the round conference table. Old Zhou sat in the center of the long side, with an empty seat next to him reserved for her. As she walked in, all eyes were on her. Those burning, scrutinizing gazes, those expectant looks waiting for a good show, made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She didn't sit in the head seat, but instead went to an ordinary seat next to old Zhou, put her bag at her feet, and then took out the self-examination report and placed it on the table. Distinguished directors, before the formal meeting begins, I have a personal statement to present to you. Su Qing's voice was clear and steady, even carrying a hint of guilt she deliberately cultivated. First of all, I want to apologize to everyone because my personal misconduct has caused serious reputational damage and financial risks to the group. She turned to the first page of the report, her knuckles white from the pressure. I admit that 3 months ago, under the guise of reserve funds for new business expansion, I transferred 37 million yuan from the group's accounts to a third-party company, which was then transferred to my personal financial account for short-term investment. I originally planned to repay this money within 2 months, but due to the liquidity problems of the investment targets, I was unable to repay it on time. I completed all redemption operations this morning, with the principal plus interest totaling 38.24 million yuan, which will be fully transferred to the group's designated account before 3 p.m. today. The directors exchanged glances. The director with gold-rimmed glasses raised an eyebrow. President Su, do you mean you've already prepared this money? Yes. Su Qing nodded. I confirmed the transfer channel with the bank before coming to this meeting, and it will definitely arrive before 3 p.m. today. Furthermore, I need to report something even more important to the board during the transfer of these funds. My direct contact, Chen Lang, used information he possessed about the intermediaries to embezzle 3.2 million yuan, transferring it to his personal account. I have compiled complete bank statements and related agreements for this portion of the money, which are attached to the report. She pushed a thick stack of photocopies to the center of the table. The meeting room fell silent for a moment. Then several directors simultaneously reached for the papers, the rustling of pages turning filling the air. Old Zhou didn't look at the documents. He kept his eyes on Su Qing's. Her gaze was unwavering, maintaining a frank, confessional look. Old Zhou sighed inwardly. This girl was clever after all. By dragging Chen Lang into this mess, she had turned the guilt of 2 people into the betrayal of 1, and a large portion of the board's anger would be transferred to a treacherous subordinate. Did Chen Lang come today? A director surnamed he asked. Looking up, I called him 3 times, and he hung up on all of them. But I think he'll come, because today's meeting directly relates to his qualifications and personal reputation. Su Qing replied. Just then, the meeting room door opened. Chen Lang stood in the doorway, wearing a wrinkled shirt, the collar unbuttoned, a stubble of stubble on his chin, looking like he'd spent the night hiding on some street corner. He held a brown paper bag in his hand, his gaze sweeping across the conference table before finally settling on Su Qing's face. Chen Lang, the gold-rimmed, bespectacled director, spoke first. You've come at the right time. President Su just submitted a report mentioning that you embezzled 3.2 million yuan from the fund transfer she authorized. What do you have to explain? Chen Lang slowly walked in, not going to an empty seat, but going straight to Su Qing. He stopped when he was only a step away from her, slamming the brown paper bag onto the table in front of Su Qing. Its contents spilled out, a stack of printed screenshots of WeChat chat history. An explanation? Chen Lang's voice was hoarse with a sense of despair. My explanation is right here. Distinguished directors. These are all my private chat logs with Su Qing from the past year, including complete conversations where she explicitly instructed me on how to handle that fund. Please take a look and see if I misappropriated it, or if she authorized me to keep a portion of the money in my account for emergency use. Su Qing's face instantly changed. She grabbed the printed papers and flipped through them, her fingers tracing the surface. The chat logs were real. She had indeed told Chen Lang on WeChat to keep the money with him for emergencies and not to use the company account. At the time, she wanted to make her financial operations appear more discreet and have Chen Lang share some of the risk of the fund's flow. But she never expected Chen Lang to screenshot and save these chat logs and then publicly display them today. Chen Lang. Su Qing's voice trembled uncontrollably. Do you know what you're doing? These screenshots are just my instructions for you to temporarily hold the funds. The use of that money has always been under my authorization. You have never submitted any usage reports to me. Reports? Chen Lang turned to face all the directors, spreading his hands. You all see that, right? President Su means I took her money but didn't report it truthfully. Then I'd like to ask President Su a more direct question. When you asked me to register the shell company, you told me the money was a loan, and you said you'd repay it in 2 months. Now 3 months have passed. If Jiang Han hadn't exposed this, when do you plan to repay it? Are you planning to confess at the board meeting? Su Qing suddenly stood up, her chair sliding back half a meter. Chen Lang. Shut up. I've been silent for 3 years. Chen Lang's voice suddenly rose. He even smiled. But that smile was full of the madness of someone who had torn off their mask. From the moment you recruited me into the company, I've kept silent and been your shadow for 3 years. You told me to suppress Jiang Han, and I suppressed him. You told me to steal his project proposals, and I stole them. You told me to act like a couple with you, and I did. Now that it's all out in the open, you want to get away cleanly by throwing me out as a scapegoat? Su Qing, you're dreaming. The meeting room was deathly silent. The directors held the printed chat logs, turning the pages one by one, each person's expression subtly changing. The director with the gold-rimmed glasses took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. The director surnamed, he tossed the papers onto the table and leaned back in his chair. Old Zhou, however, didn't look at the screenshots. He kept staring at Su Qing. Disappointment welled up in his eyes behind his reading glasses. Su Qing stood there, her fingertips cold, her mind buzzing. She finally understood the meaning of the message Jiang Han had sent last night. If you confess, I'll back down. But she didn't confess. She chose to proactively confess her part, pushing Chen Lang forward as a scapegoat. Jiang Han had clearly anticipated this, pushing Chen Lang into a corner, forcing him to turn on her. Now, her sincere confession had been exposed by Chen Lang as a cover-up, her carefully crafted mitigation strategy crumbling in the first round. Ladies and gentlemen, old Zhou finally spoke, his voice deep and resolute, yet carrying an undeniable force. This morning's meeting was originally about how to deal with the database crash and the bank's early repayment. But now it seems that our first priority is to address the crisis of trust within the internal management team. He stood up, picked up the stack of self-inspection reports submitted by Su Qing and the chat logs Chen Lang had thrown out, put them together in a file bag. I propose that today's meeting be adjourned temporarily. All materials will be sealed by the 3 independent directors, and a third-party audit team will be simultaneously launched to conduct a special financial and personnel audit of the group. During the audit, Comrade Su Qing and Comrade Chen Lang will be suspended from all administrative positions to cooperate with the investigation. Chen Lang turned and left, his leather shoes clicking rapidly on the floor, the door slamming shut behind him. Su Qing remained standing there, looking at the pile of scattered chat logs on the table, each one containing her own words. Every word certain and true. She slowly sat back in her chair, picked up the now cold mineral water in front of her, took a sip, and swallowed. Then she looked up at old Zhou. Uncle Zhou, I accept the decision to adjourn the meeting. I will fully cooperate during the audit. In addition, I request that I personally hold an internal briefing for all middle and senior management personnel before this afternoon to explain all the issues raised at today's meeting in detail. Old Zhou looked at her, remained silent for 3 seconds, then nodded. Okay, but I'll send someone to listen in. Su Qing stood up, packed her things, and walked towards the door. She paused at the door, not turning back. Her voice soft. Uncle Zhou, Jiang Han is right. I did scheme against him. But do you know? I schemed against him because I was afraid. He's too strong. So strong that no matter what I do, I feel unworthy of him. I thought that bringing him down would put my mind at ease. But after bringing him down, I realized that I myself couldn't stand firmly in my own position. After the door closed, old Zhou sat in the empty conference room, reopening the stack of chat logs, looking at a sentence Su Qing had sent to Chen Lang on one page. Don't worry. That bookworm Jiang Han won't find out anything. He sighed, took off his reading glasses, and wiped them. In an alley outside the group's building, Chen Lang was squatting next to a trash can, smoking heavily. His phone screen displayed Jiang Han's last message. Chen Lang, finish what you're supposed to do today, and I can pretend the 3.2 million yuan thing never happened. Go. Don't look back. Chen Lang stubbed out his cigarette on the wall, stood up, dusted off his trousers, and walked towards the subway station without looking back. He knew he would never return to this building, but at least he had kept the money and his freedom. As for Su Qing, he thought she would probably stay in that chairman's chair until the last nail was pulled out. Meanwhile, Su Qing stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, looking down at the ant-like flow of cars and people below. She looked down at Jiang Han's name in her contacts on her phone screen, her thumb hovering over the dial button for a full 2 minutes. In the end, she didn't dial. She turned her phone face down on the table, picked up the landline, and dialed her secretary's number. Arrange a company-wide briefing at 3 p.m. today. The largest conference room was used. All department heads and above were notified that attendance was mandatory, and unexcused absences would be treated as absenteeism. After hanging up, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The sunlight outside was bright, almost blinding. She suddenly wondered if she could turn back time 12 years. To that autumn when she and Jiang Han first met. Would she make a different choice? But she knew there were no what-ifs. She had chosen this path, selecting what she thought was the smarter direction at every fork in the road, ultimately ending up on the edge of a cliff. At 2:50 p.m., the group's largest multifunctional conference hall was already packed. Almost all 300 chairs were occupied, with many standing in the last few rows. Department heads, project managers, core staff, even logistics and front desk supervisors were present. News spread like wildfire throughout the morning. General Manager Su was going to hold an all-staff briefing. Rumors circulated that Chen Lang had run away. The database was gone and the company was going to collapse. Various versions of rumors fermented into a silent panic in the break room and elevators. Su Qing stood in the backstage area by the side door of the conference hall, clutching a handwritten speech. She hadn't used a printed copy because she feared that writing some things down would make her sound weak when she read them aloud. The hasty handwriting, on the other hand, carried a sense of desperate resolve. Today, she wore a black, fitted suit dress, her hair tied in a low ponytail, and no jewelry, as plain as if she were attending a funeral. Her own funeral. Ms. Su. 3 minutes left. Her secretary whispered. Su Qing nodded, folded the speech, put it in her pocket, and pushed open the side door to leave. Her high heels clicked clearly on the wooden floor of the conference hall, drawing all eyes to her like spotlights. She walked behind the podium, adjusted the microphone, and then glanced around at the sea of heads below. Colleagues, this afternoon's briefing was convened at my request to the board of directors. Su Qing began, her voice carrying a calm that came after suppressed emotions. I know there have been many rumors circulating within the company since this morning regarding the database crash, the management changes, and myself. Rather than having you piece together the truth through chatter in the break room, I'd rather stand here and explain everything clearly. Silence fell over the audience. The department directors in the first row exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Su Qing took out the handwritten manuscript from her pocket, unfolded it, glanced at it, then put it back in her pocket. She suddenly changed her mind. If today was destined to be her Waterloo, then at least she would say a few truths not written down. First, regarding the database. Su Qing placed her hands on either side of the podium, leaning slightly forward. The initiator of this attack is my ex-husband, your former vice president, Jiang Han. Before leaving, he used his internal system privileges to implant encryption, aiming to retaliate against me personally in the appointment of the new vice president, Chen Lang. A low murmur arose from the audience. Some gasped, some whispered. Su Qing raised a hand, and the murmur gradually subsided. Second, regarding Chen Lang. Su Qing paused for a second, and everyone in the audience saw her Adam's apple bob. Chen Lang left the company this morning, and all his positions are immediately terminated. I must confess to everyone here that over the past 3 years, I had a personal relationship with Chen Lang that went beyond the scope of work. This relationship affected my management judgment and personnel decisions, and I apologize to all my colleagues for this. When she said this, the conference room fell into absolute silence. Even the slight whirring of the air conditioning vents was clearly audible. Over 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on the woman on the stage. Some looked shocked, some disappointed, some secretly gloating, but most wore expressions of unspeakable complexity. Su Qing had worked at this group for 20 years, taking over from her father as a young woman in her 20s. She had fought her way up to where she was now, and most of the people in the audience had benefited from her kindness, heard her impassioned speeches at annual meetings, and seen her fall asleep at her desk after working through the night revising plans. Now, she stood on the stage, tearing away her most dignified facade. The third matter. Su Qing took a breath, her voice trembling slightly, concerned her personal financial situation. 3 months ago, she transferred funds from the group's account under the guise of a reserve fund for new business expansion for short-term personal use. This money would be fully returned to the group by 3 p.m. today. There were irregularities in the relevant approval process, and she submitted a complete self-inspection report at the board meeting this morning and voluntarily accepted an internal audit. A marketing director in the first row finally couldn't hold back any longer. He raised his hand and asked, "President Su, I want to ask a practical question. When can the database be restored? Our clients are urging us for a solution. Project progress has completely stalled. If we delay past this weekend, several major clients might terminate their contracts." Su Qing looked at the director, her gaze unwavering. "One of the topics I discussed with the board this morning was restoring the database as soon as possible. We are currently negotiating with former Vice President Jiang Han. He has promised that if the management-level issues are properly resolved, the database decryption key can be delivered within a week." "A week?" Someone in the back row shouted. "President Su, in a week, we could lose orders worth hundreds of millions." "I know." Su Qing's voice suddenly dropped, carrying a sense of resigned acceptance. "So, I'm standing here today not only to explain the situation, but also to resign from all of you, regardless of whether the database recovery goes smoothly. As the current chairman of the group, I bear direct leadership responsibility for all recent events. I will formally submit my resignation to the board of directors this afternoon." These words were like a bomb dropped into the conference room. Several directors in the front row jumped to their feet, and a former vice president who had worked with Su Qing for 15 years rushed to the podium. "President Su, you can't resign now. The company is in such a mess. Who will stabilize things if you leave? Even if you're at fault, wait until the data is recovered." "Yes, President Su. Why resign? Let's resolve this first," someone in the back row shouted. The conference room erupted in chaos. Some stood up and shouted. Some pulled out their phones to send messages. And some discussed the future of their departments after Su Qing's sudden resignation. Su Qing stood on the podium, watching all this, a sense of absurd desolation washing over her. Having been a manager for 20 years and weathered countless storms, she never imagined that when she announced her resignation on stage, a large portion of the audience would try to persuade her to stay. She couldn't distinguish how much genuine reluctance was behind those attempts to stay, and how much was simply fear of losing her job. But those voices pierced her ears, bringing tears to her eyes. She raised her hands and pressed them down, silencing the room once more. "Everyone, please hear me out. My resignation doesn't mean I'm abandoning the company. I promised the board that I will assist with the handover process as an advisor until the audit is completed and the new management team is in place. I will take full responsibility for my mistakes and will not let any junior employee lose their job because of me." As she spoke, her gaze suddenly swept past the sea of heads below, landing on a corner in the back row of the conference room. There stood a man in a gray jacket, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, his face expressionless. Su Qing's heart skipped a beat. Jiang Han. He was back. She didn't know when he entered the conference room, or whether he slipped in through the side or back door. But he stood there, like a sculpture forcibly thrust into reality from her memory. The microphone on the stage amplified the gasp she made throughout the room, and everyone followed her gaze to the back. His gray figure stood out starkly yet calmly under the watchful eyes of over 300 people. Jiang Han neither approached nor spoke. He simply stood there, looking at Su Qing on the podium. His gaze held neither the arrogance of a victor nor the satisfaction of a vengeance, only a weary scrutiny, like a teacher grading a long overdue assignment. Su Qing's hand loosened its grip on the podium, her fingertips trembling slightly. She spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's briefing. Specific work arrangements will be communicated separately by the department directors. Thank you." Then she stepped down from the podium, her high heels clicking as she walked step by step through the aisle in the center of the conference hall towards the back row. The crowd automatically parted to make way for her. No one stopped her, but everyone's eyes followed her like tracking lights, watching her walk to the man in the gray jacket, face to face with her ex-husband, whom she had personally kicked out. At the most vulnerable moment of her life, the distance between them was less than a meter. Su Qing looked up at him and noticed something new in his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. That something was called indifference, something more terrifying than hatred. "When did you get back?" Su Qing asked, her voice low enough that only the two of them could hear. "An hour ago." Jiang Han's voice was flat. "I arrived half an hour before your briefing. I wanted to see how you'd handle this." "What do you want to see?" Su Qing's lips curled into a faint smile, half of it self-deprecating. "Watch me kneel and beg for forgiveness in front of all the employees?" "Jiang Han, I've said everything I needed to say and admitted everything I needed to admit. I've met your conditions." Jiang Han looked at her silently for 2 seconds. "Su Qing, you still don't understand. What I want isn't your resignation, repayment, or apology, those superficial gestures. What I want is for you to publicly admit that every decision you've made in these 12 years, every instance of suppressing me, every conspiracy with Chun Lang, was because you were afraid of me." Su Qing's pupils contracted slightly. "Why do you think I'd admit that?" "Because if you don't admit it, your resignation won't be accepted." Jiang Han took out his phone from his jacket pocket and pulled up an email. "Before I arrived, I had an online meeting with 3 independent directors. They agreed to let me take over your position as interim CEO, responsible for database recovery and bank bailout. The condition is, I need public authorization from the board, and this authorization is contingent on the current chairperson, Ms. Su Qing, explicitly admitting at a company-wide briefing that her departure was due to personal management errors and unethical conduct." Su Qing stared at the phone screen, which displayed a pre-written joint statement awaiting her signature. She reached out to take it, but Jiang Han put the phone back in his pocket. "You don't need to sign now," he said, "but if you sign, the board will approve your resignation, and the audit will be limited to our financial dealings, not extending to the entire management team. If you don't sign, the audit will cover all of the group's financial data for the past 3 years, and what they find might be more than 37 million. Su Qing's nails dug into her palms. "You're threatening me. I'm giving you a choice," Jiang Han said, "just as fair as when you signed my resignation agreement in the office." Most of the surrounding crowd had dispersed, but some people still stood at a distance, pretending to look at their phones or discuss work. But their eyes kept glancing this way. Su Qing felt like she was standing in a transparent glass dome, everyone watching her performance. While the last page of the script was in the hands of the man opposite her, she suddenly smiled, a smile of resigned relief. "Okay, I'll sign. Give me your statement." Jiang Han pulled a folded piece of paper and a pen from his pocket and handed them to Su Qing. Su Qing took them, leaned against the wall, and wrote her name in the signature section, the handwriting exactly the same as when she signed the prenuptial agreement years ago. Only this time, she knew that after signing, Her history in this company would end. She handed the paper and pen back to Jiang Han and turned to walk towards the side door of the conference room. After 3 steps, she stopped. Without turning back, Jiang Han, you won. But I want to tell you something. You won not because you were right, but because you were prepared earlier than me. Next time you marry someone, remember to reveal your hand early. Jiang Han stood there, watching her disappear behind the side door. The signed statement clenched slightly in his hand. He didn't answer her last question, because he knew in his heart he had never considered a next time. He went into the lounge on the side of the conference hall, closed the door, and dialed old Joe's number. She signed. We can arrange the follow-up procedures now. Old Joe was silent for a long time on the other end of the phone. Xiaojiang, what do you plan to do about the database? Restore 80% of the core data by today. Jiang Han said. The remaining important documents will be manually entered. I brought a technical team back, and we can get most of the business systems running through tonight. I already sent a withdrawal letter for the bank's early repayment notice this afternoon. The 9 billion short-term loan has been extended normally. No need to rush to repay. Old Joe sighed. Are you doing all this for the company, or to make her lose even more completely? Jiang Han walked to the window of the lounge, watching the black figure walking out of the main door downstairs. Su Qing walked quickly, her shoulders slightly forward, as if resisting some invisible pressure. From this angle, he could only see the top of her head, the whirl of hair that once gave him a sense of security, now just the fragile back of an ordinary human head. For my own sake, he said, Uncle Joe, I've dedicated 12 years to this company. I don't want it to be ruined. As for Su Qing, she's already ruined herself enough. She doesn't need me to finish her off. After hanging up, Jiang Han leaned against the window, took a piece of candy from his pocket, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. He'd quit smoking for over half a year, but when anxious, he always liked to suck on something. Candy was the safest choice. The moment the sweetness melted on his tongue, he suddenly remembered a night many years ago when Su Qing came home late from work. He warmed her a glass of milk, and after drinking it, she said, Jiang Han, you're so good to me. I can't live without you for the rest of my life. Back then, her forever was serious, and what happened afterward was also serious. That's how people are. They speak the truth in every moment. But the truth changes. He shook his head, banishing those emotions from his mind, and picked up his phone to send instructions to the technical team. They had to work all night tonight, stabilize the stock price tomorrow, and revisit all client relationships the day after. The company couldn't function without him, but it would still run smoothly without Su Qing. He glanced down at the signed statement, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and walked out of the lounge. As Su Qing walked out of the company building, the setting sun bathed the entire city in a warm orange hue. She stood on the steps and looked up at the sky. Several white trails from airplanes stretched across the horizon, forming a network, like a net she couldn't escape. The young security guard peeked out at her, then quickly withdrew. He had probably already heard about Su Qing's resignation and didn't know how to look at his former boss. She walked towards the parking lot, the sound of her high heels on the asphalt crisp in the empty twilight. She opened the car door and got in, not immediately starting the engine, but first taking out her phone and turning it on. She had kept her phone off since entering the meeting room, and now dozens of unread messages were popping up on the screen. The first one was from Chun Lang. I heard you resigned? Congratulations. You've finally fallen from your pedestal. By the way, I've transferred that 3.2 million. Calling the police won't help. That account was closed this morning. The second message was from her mother, Ching Ching. The court downstairs has put a seal on our door, saying the house has been seized. What happened? How could your father's belongings be seized? Come back and check quickly. The third message was from old Joe, Su Qing. Your money arrived at 3:10 p.m., and finance has confirmed it. I'll help you expedite your resignation process. A formal resolution should be issued as early as next week. Take care and rest. Don't overwork yourself. The fourth message was from the CFO, President Su. The bank says the early repayment notice has been withdrawn. It was handled by President Jiang. Also, the 38.24 million you returned this afternoon has been deposited, and the audit team will begin tomorrow. Take care. Su Qing read through each message, her fingers slowly tightening on the steering wheel. When she saw her mother's message, her eyes suddenly welled up, and she blinked hard to force back the tears. The court seized the house. It was the house her father left her. The last trace of the Su family in this city. She knew it was because she had previously acted as a guarantor for a company debt in her own name. And now the company's debt restructuring was not yet complete, and the guarantor was being held accountable. She dialed her mother's number, which rang once before being answered. The old lady's voice was panicked and off-key. "Ching Ching, you finally answered the phone. Those people have all sorts of paperwork, saying it's some kind of property preservation. I told them to wait, but they wouldn't. So they put a note on the door. Mom, don't worry. I'll handle it." Su Qing tried to soften her voice as much as possible. "Where are you now?" "I'm at your Aunt Lee's house. I'm afraid to go back." "Ching Ching, they said the house is going to be auctioned off. Is that true?" Su Qing closed her eyes, her forehead resting on the steering wheel. "Mom, I'll handle the house issue. You stay at Aunt Lee's house for a couple of days. I'll pick you up after I'm done here. Take care of yourself. Take your medicine on time. Don't worry." She hung up the phone, slumped over the steering wheel, and took a few deep breaths. The most precious things her father left her were this company and that house. She had just personally handed over the company this afternoon, and the house was on the verge of collapse. All the dignity and safety net she had painstakingly built up over most of her life crumbled like a tower of building blocks with its base removed. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number, containing only one sentence. "President Su. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Fonglin Tea House in the west of the city. Someone wants to see you. You'll regret it if you don't come." Su Qing stared at the message for a long time, then dialed back. But the other party's phone was already switched off. She tossed her phone onto the passenger seat and started the car. Amidst the roar of the engine, she suddenly felt incredibly tired, an unprecedented weariness seeping from her very bones, making even her foot tremble slightly as she pressed the accelerator. She didn't go home. She didn't know where to go. Her home was sealed off. She drove aimlessly around the city for 40 minutes, finally stopping in front of a small noodle shop she and Zhang Han used to frequent. The shop was still there. The lettering on the signboard faded. The owner had changed, but the aroma of scallion oil wafting from the shop remained the same. She went in, ordered a bowl of plain noodles, and sat in a corner to eat slowly. There weren't many customers in the shop. The proprietress was watching TV behind the counter, the volume very low, broadcasting local news. Su Qing strained her ears and suddenly looked up when she heard the words XX Group. She saw a news flash scrolling across the screen. XX Group, a well-known company in the city, issued an announcement today confirming that Chairman Su has resigned from all positions for personal reasons, and former Vice President Jiang will take over as interim CEO. Affected by this news, the group's stock price closed down 4.7% today. Market analysts believe that short-term fluctuations are inevitable due to personnel changes. Su Qing placed her chopsticks on the rim of her bowl, the steam from the noodles forming a hazy white mist. Looking at the familiar name on the TV screen, now labeled former chairman, an indescribable emptiness welled up inside her. Everything she had feared losing, her career, status, reputation, family, slipped through her fingers one by one within 24 hours. Like sand slipping through her fingers the tighter she held on. When she took out her wallet to pay, she found she didn't have enough cash. She searched every compartment before finally managing to scrape together 15 yuan. The shopkeeper gave her 50 cents in change. Clutching that coin, she stood at the shop entrance, the streetlight casting her lonely shadow. Her phone vibrated again. It was that unfamiliar number again. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Maple Forest Tea House. Please be on time." This time, she typed a reply immediately. "Who are you?" The other party replied 5 minutes later. "Chun Lang's creditor." Su Qing stared at those 4 words for a long time, then suddenly realized something. Chun Lang was in debt. Chun Lang had embezzled 3,200,000 from her and made some deal with Zhang Han to get himself out of trouble. How could he be in debt? The only possibility was Chun Lang had other sources of income, and the money she had authorized him to hold wasn't entirely in his hands. Some of it had flowed elsewhere. She arrived at Maple Forest Tea House at 9:45 a.m. the next day. It was a tea house tucked away deep in an alley in the old city. The storefront was small, but the interior was surprisingly spacious, with bamboo curtains, wooden tables, and purple clay teapots, a quiet retreat. She chose a seat by the window, ordered a pot of Tiguanyin tea. And before the tea had even brewed, someone pushed open the door and walked in. It was a man in his 40s, wearing a black jacket, with a square face and a shrewd look in his eyes, as if he were involved in shady dealings. He saw Su Qing, walked straight over, sat down, placed a brown paper bag on the table, and pushed it towards her. "Ms. Su, I've heard so much about you. My name is Wu Bin. I'm in the cash flow business." He spoke bluntly. "Chen Lang owes me 3.5 million, of which 3.2 million is from the money you transferred to him. He transferred the bulk of it to me that very night after receiving the money, saying he'd pay half the interest first. But the principal hasn't been repaid yet." Su Qing frowned. "What does his debt to you have to do with me?" Wu Bin smiled, a smile that sent chills down Su Qing's spine, "because the source of that money is your Su Group's accounts. When Chen Lang borrowed money from me, the collateral was a copy of the shell company registration document that you, Su, signed. In other words, if he doesn't repay me, I can take that document to your group's audit team and say that your shell company had loan dealings with me. What will the audit team think?" Su Qing's fingers tightened on the table. That beast Chen Lang. He not only embezzled her money to pay off his own debts, but also used the document she signed as collateral to lend money to loan sharks. If the audit team sees this document now, the fact that all the fund flows she wrote in her self-inspection report were clearly traceable will become a lie, and the audit team will determine that she has also failed to disclose related party transactions. "What do you want?" Su Qing asked directly. Wu Bin picked up his teacup and took a sip. "Simple. You repay the 3.5 million that Chen Lang owes me, and I will destroy the original document and all copies in your presence. From now on, we're even. This matter will never appear in any audit report. Why should I believe you won't keep a backup after destroying it?" Wu Bin took a lighter from his jacket pocket, then pulled out a few sheets of paper from a brown paper bag and lit a corner of it in front of Su Qing. The flames leaped up the edge of the paper, and the ash fell onto the tea tray, quickly burning into black fragments. "This is the original," he said. "You can watch me delete the backup from the computer, but the money needs to be in my account first. It's a mutual exchange of goodwill." Su Qing stared at the pile of still smoking ash, her mind racing with calculations. 3.5 million. She only had a little over 1 million in savings and a credit card with a 500,000 limit left. Far from enough. If she misappropriated other funds, the audit team was investigating her accounts, and any large fluctuations would be discovered. "I don't have that much cash," Su Qing said, "but I can give you something to settle the debt." Chen Lang has a record of his collaborations with several other rival companies, containing details of all the shady transactions he'd made over the past 3 years. If you get your hands on that, you'll have his Achilles heel, and he won't dare not repay you. Wu Bin squinted at Su Qing, as if assessing whether what she said was worth 3.5 million. "How do I know that record is real?" "You have his WeChat, right? Send him a message now, asking if he remembers the extra fee-sharing agreement for the Xingyao City project. If he panics, then it's real, because the first item in that record is his complete account of private commission rebates for the Xingyao City project." Wu Bin took out his phone and operated it. Less than a minute after he sent the message, Chen Lang's reply popped up. "How the hell do you know this? Who told you? Are you investigating me?" Wu Bin turned the phone screen towards Su Qing, a satisfied smile on his face. "Deal. Where is it?" "In my safe." After saying this, Su Qing suddenly remembered that her house had been sealed off and seized. She couldn't get in, but I can tell you the safe's combination. You can find a way in and get it yourself. The seal is a civil seizure, mainly to prevent the transfer of property. If you're just taking out a document, as long as the property management doesn't find out, it's fine." Wu Bin stood up and put his lighter in his pocket. "Give me the address and password. Let's finish this business before this afternoon, and then we'll have nothing to do with each other anymore." "President Su, you're a smart person. You know which side you should be on." Su Qing wrote the address and password on a tissue and pushed it over. Wu Bin grabbed it, glanced at it, nodded, and turned to leave. She was left alone in the tea room. The Tiguanyin tea had been overbrewed, the tea soup a bitter yellow. She picked it up and took a sip, the bitterness spreading from the tip of her tongue to the depths of her throat. She put down the cup, looking at the pedestrians coming and going in the alley outside the window, and suddenly felt that there was a thick layer of glass separating the world from her. She could see everyone, but she couldn't touch them, and they couldn't touch her either. She sat in the quiet little tea house, like a statue forgotten at some point in the past. Her phone rang. This time it was Jiang Han. She hesitated for 3 seconds before answering. Hello? Su Qing. I just got a message saying someone broke into your house and broke into the safe this afternoon. Jiang Han's voice was deep. You know about this? Su Qing's heart skipped a beat. How did he know? But then she thought about his connections in the company. He must have people watching the property management. I know. I sent them. There was a 2-second silence on the other end of the line. Jiang Han's voice carried an emotion Su Qing hadn't heard in a long time. An emotion of disappointment. You let loan sharks rummage through the house your father left you. Su Qing, have you become so indifferent that you don't care about anything anymore? What's the point of me caring? Su Qing's voice suddenly rose. The only 2 customers in the tea house turned to look at her. She lowered her voice, but the sharpness in her tone remained. The house had already been seized. One more person going in wouldn't make a difference. Chun Lang owes me money, and I'm using Chun Lang's incriminating evidence to pay off the debt. What's wrong with that? Jiang Han's voice turned cold. Chun Lang's incriminating evidence. Do you know that the cooperation record you gave out also included 3 other illegal projects besides the Xingyao City project? 2 of those projects involve you. The expense approval forms you signed are also in there. If Wu Bin sells them to the audit team, your self-inspection report will be completely ruined. Su Qing's hand holding her phone froze. She flipped through the record, but only looked at the Xingyao City project section, not moving on. If there were indeed things she had signed in there. She suddenly stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. I told him to only take that record. He won't do anything else. He won't do anything else. Jiang Han sneered. Su Qing, when did you become so naive? A person in the business of cash flow, given a document full of company violations, would he only use Chun Lang's page as a target? He could divide the entire document into 10 parts and sell them back to your competitors. You've essentially laid your entire family's underwear out to dry on the street. Anyone passing by can grab a piece. Su Qing slumped back into her chair, beads of cold sweat forming on her forehead. She wanted to ask him to stop it, but the words caught in her throat as she suddenly remembered. She was the one who had handed over the address and password. She had personally delivered a potentially game-changing piece of evidence into the jaws of the wolf. And now the wolf was long gone. She didn't even know which way it had gone. Su Qing. Jiang Han's voice came through the receiver, a little calmer than before. I can help you get that record back. I know Wu Bin. I'm very familiar with his business dealings. I can get him to return it to you exactly as it is with just a phone call. But I have conditions. What conditions? Within 3 days. You must sign a statement waiving all rights to pursue the group's shares. Jiang Han said. You still have 3% of the shares, which your father left you. I know that's your last thing. But if you don't sign, the audit team will see the record Wu Bin has sooner or later. And then it won't just be a matter of resigning. You choose. Su Qing leaned back in her chair with her eyes closed. The tea had completely gone cold. Her lips moved, uttering 2 extremely soft words. I'll sign. Jiang Han hung up the phone. Su Qing placed her phone on the table, watching the sunlight outside the window slowly slant westward. She suddenly remembered years ago when her father, lying on his sickbed, held her hand and said, Qing Qing, Dad has saved 2 things for you in this life, a company and a house. That's enough. Don't work too hard. She nodded tearfully then, saying, Dad, don't worry. I'll protect them. Now she sat in a small tea house. The company gone, the house sealed off, and the 3% of shares her father left her about to be transferred from her name with a signature. Everything she had protected for 20 years would be gone in 3 days. She lowered her head, her forehead pressed against the cold table, and finally cried. A few customers quietly sipped their tea in the tea house. The proprietress turned up the television volume behind the counter. The news was reporting the stock market closing figures, affected by personnel changes. XX Group's stock price continued to decline today, closing lower. No one turned to look at her. Her sobs were drowned out by the television, buried by the steam from the tea, and silently swallowed by the fleeting time of this twilight. As she cried until her whole body convulsed, her phone lit up. A new message appeared in her notification bar. The sender was Jiang Han. The message was short. The statement template has been sent to your email. Find a place to print it, sign it, and mail it to me. Su Qing, this is the end. She looked at the words, wiped away her tears with her sleeve, stood up, paid the bill, and left the tea house. The wind outside carried the cool, dry chill of early autumn. She took a deep breath, forcing back the remaining moisture in her eyes, and then hailed a taxi, driver, to the nearest print shop. The wheels rolled over the road, and the twilight light slanted in through the car window, gilding her profile. Her expression was as calm as a frozen lake, its surface undisturbed by turbulent undercurrents. When Su Qing came out of the print shop, she clutched the freshly printed Declaration of Waiver of Equity Retroactive Rights. The paper still warm from the printer. She stood by the roadside, found a chain coffee shop, ordered an Americano, and sat in a corner booth, reading the declaration 3 times from beginning to end. With each reading, the details Jiang Han had hidden in the clauses stung her more: voluntary and irrevocable waiver, confirming that she no longer has any claims to any historical equity and derivative rights under the name of XX Group. This declaration is effective from the date of signing and is retroactive. These cold legal terms were like scalpels, precisely severing the last thread of flesh and blood between her and the company that no longer belonged to her. She paused for a long time above the signature line. The pen tip hovered, the ink almost falling. She remembered what her father had said when he transferred the shares to her. This was her trump card. Don't use it unless absolutely necessary. Now she had used it, but the way she used it was to hand over this trump card. Her phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Jiang Han urging her. I've already spoken to Wu Bin. The documents will be returned to your designated address within 2 hours. Sign it and send me a scanned copy. Su Qing stared at the line of text on the screen, then suddenly typed a reply. Jiang Han, are you comfortable with going to this point? After sending it, she didn't expect him to reply, but her phone lit up quickly. Not comfortable, but I'd rather be uncomfortable than not finish it. She looked at that line and suddenly felt the conversation couldn't continue. It felt like 2 people on a battlefield, separated by mountains of corpses and seas of blood, clearly enemies, yet able to clearly see the lingering emotions in each other's eyes. She took a deep breath. The pen fell, and Su Qing neatly signed her name on the line. Then she opened the phone scanning function, converted the document into a PDF, and sent it to Jiang Han's email address. The moment the notification popped up, she felt something taut inside her snap. She leaned back in her booth, letting out a long breath. The steam from her Americano hit her face, the bitterness rising from the cup. She didn't drink it, but held the paper cup like a hand warmer, feeling its temperature gradually change from scalding to warm to slightly cool. She called her mother. Mom, I've taken care of the house. You can go back to live here today. I'll have someone remove the seal on the door. Don't touch the safe when you get back. There are some documents inside that I need to process. I'll pick it up in a couple of days. The old lady visibly relaxed on the other end of the line. Ching Ching, are you all right? I saw on the news that you resigned. And your dad's company. The company is still operating. Su Qing interrupted. It's just that someone else is managing it. Mom, I might be away for a while. Take care of yourself and take your medicine on time. Call me if you need anything. After hanging up the phone, she opened her contacts, found Wu Bin's number, and dialed it. It rang twice before he answered. Mr. Wu, Jiang Han should have contacted you, right? How are you planning to return the items? Wu Bin's voice on the phone carried a helpless, mocking laugh, as if he'd been outmaneuvered. President Su, you're really something. President Jiang personally called me, saying that if this document appeared anywhere else, his connections in the industry could cripple all my business dealings. President Su, I put the items back in your safe at 4 o'clock this afternoon. You haven't changed the password, have you? Just confirm. Su Qing closed her eyes. No, I just need to confirm. She hung up and sat in the coffee shop for another 10 minutes, until the Americano had completely cooled down before getting up to leave. When she took a taxi back to her apartment building, she looked up at the clivia her father had nurtured for 10 years on the windowsill. It was still green, its leaves swaying gently in the evening breeze. She went to the door. The seal had indeed been torn off, leaving a ring of adhesive residue. A note from the property management was tucked under the door. Dear resident, the civil seizure mark on your door has been removed. Please clean up the adhesive residue as soon as possible. Thank you for your cooperation. She pushed the door open and went inside. The house was exactly the same as when she left that morning. The cushions on the sofa were askew, and the half-finished glass of cold water she hadn't drunk that night sat on the coffee table. She went to the study. The safe door was ajar, and the brown paper bag inside was still there. Even the order of the documents inside hadn't changed. She took it out and looked through it, confirming that it was the original document she had given away. With all the pages complete and nothing missing, she sat on the study floor, the recovered record spread out on her lap, and suddenly felt absurd. She thought she could use this to pay off the $3.5 million debt, but it had come full circle and returned to her. And the price she paid was signing off the last 3% of the shares. She was like a gambler who had bet the wrong chips at the table, losing all her capital only to discover that the card she thought would turn the tide had actually been held by the other side from the start. She stood up, locked the record in the bottom of the safe, and changed all the passwords. The new password was the last 6 digits of her mother's birthday. After doing this, she went to the living room window. It was completely dark outside, and the buildings across the street were dotted with lights. Through those windows, she saw other people's lives, families eating around the dining table, some sitting on the sofa watching TV, and laundry still hanging on the balcony. Those ordinary, down-to-earth things seemed to her like a distant and unfamiliar country. Her phone rang. This time it was Mr. Zhou calling. Su Qing, the board of directors approved your resignation this afternoon. The official documents will be sent tomorrow. In addition, Jiang Han's appointment as interim CEO has also taken effect. Are you all right? I'm fine. Uncle Zhou. Su Qing's voice was unexpectedly calm. I wanted to tell you that I'm planning to go out of town for a while next week to clear my head. If the company needs any audit materials, please contact me directly, and I will cooperate. Old Zhou was silent for a moment. Su Qing, if your father saw you like this, he wouldn't blame you. Everyone stumbles in life. Just get back up. Su Qing gripped the phone, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Uncle Zhou, if my father saw me like this, he'd probably sit up in his coffin in anger. I've squandered everything he's saved up his whole life. What your father cares about most is you, not those things. Old Zhou's voice deepened. Su Qing, listen to my advice. Turn this page. You're still young. It's not too late to start over. Don't fixate on what you've lost. Look forward. After hanging up, Su Qing stood in the living room for a long time. She didn't turn on the lights. In the darkness, by the faint city light streaming in through the window, she looked at the blurry outlines of the furniture, recalling her past life. One piece at a time, Jiang Han picked out the sofa. He complained it was too hard and insisted on a softer one. The bookshelf was hand-built by her father, and the wood still bore the crooked little figures she had drawn with a ballpoint pen as a child. The clivia was the first flower to bloom the winter her father passed away. She had taken a picture and sent it to Jiang Han, who said it was a good omen, and that their lives would get better and better. She walked to the clivia, touched its leaves, which were covered in a thin layer of dust. She gently wiped them clean with a damp cloth, then took it down from the windowsill and placed it on the coffee table in the center of the living room. The light swept across the plant, making the green appear even more serene in the shadows. She took out her phone and sent Jiang Han a message. You received the shareholding statement. I'm back at the house, and the things in the safe are still there. Thank you for not letting Wu Bin really take them. Jiang Han replied faster than she expected. Received. You're welcome. I didn't do it for you. It was for the company. If that record were to be leaked, the auditing costs would double. Looking at the businesslike reply, Su Qing suddenly typed, Jiang Han, when are you free to finish the divorce proceedings? There was a near minute of silence on the other end, followed by a reply, if it's convenient for you. Next Monday morning at 9 o'clock. At the Civil Affairs Bureau. Okay, see you next Monday. She put down her phone, went to the bedroom, and opened the wardrobe. Her clothes were still hanging on that side. Jiang Han's clothes had been cleared out the day he moved out, leaving a row of empty hangers hanging forlornly. She reached out and touched the empty hangers, the cold metallic touch sending a chill down her spine. That night, she slept her first full night's sleep since everything had broken out. No sudden awakenings, no nightmares, no getting up in the middle of the night to check her phone. She slept soundly until 9 o'clock the next morning. The sunlight streaming through the window warmed the blankets. When she opened her eyes, for a second or two she forgot who she was and where she was. Then all her memories flooded back. She calmly sat up and began packing her luggage. At 8:30 a.m. on Monday, Su Qing stood at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, wearing a beige trench coat. She was half an hour earlier than the appointed time, carrying only a small document bag containing her documents. Nothing else. An autumn wind blew from the other end of the street, swirling a few fallen leaves past her feet. She watched the leaves twirl on the asphalt and disappear into the distant sewer drain, suddenly feeling her mood. Like those leaves, light yet empty. Jiang Han arrived at 8:50 a.m. He got out of a black sedan, wearing a dark blue suit, his hair shorter, and he looked much more energetic than when she had seen him 2 weeks ago. He also carried a document bag. Stopping in front of her, they looked at each other for a few seconds, a step apart. "Good morning," Jiang Han said first. "Good morning," Su Qing replied. The polite yet distant atmosphere between them drew a few glances from the security guards passing by. She went inside, filled out forms, submitted materials, signed, and gave her fingerprints. The whole process took less than 20 minutes. The staff handed them both stamped receipts, one for each of them. Su Qing took one, folded it, and put it in her pocket, not glancing at the paper twice. As they reached the steps by the door, Jiang Han stopped. "Where are you planning to go next?" "Haven't decided yet." Su Qing put her hands in her trench coat pockets, watching the cars go by on the street. Maybe she'd go south for a while, find a quiet place to live for a few months. Jiang Han pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "This is a contact person at a headhunting firm. They specialize in reassigning mid to senior level management positions. I mentioned you to them, and they said they could arrange a few opportunities if you're willing." Su Qing glanced at the card but didn't take it. "Jiang Han, is this charity?" "No." Jiang Han pushed the card forward a little further. "You have the ability, and you know people in the industry. You just need a way out for now. I'm not giving you opportunities. I just don't want to see you ruined. We've been married and divorced, but I don't hate you to the point of wanting you to suffer for the rest of your life." Su Qing stared at the business card for 5 seconds, then reached out and took it. "Thank you." Jiang Han nodded and turned to walk towards the black sedan. After a few steps, he stopped, without turning back, and said in a low voice, "Su Qing, if you ever meet someone who's willing to pour you warm water again, don't take it for granted." He then opened the car door, got in, started the car, merged into the traffic on the main road, and quickly disappeared around the corner. Su Qing stood on the steps of the Civil Affairs Bureau, clutching the business card in her hand. The morning breeze ruffled the hem of her trench coat. She squinted slightly, watching the car disappear into the distance, a very faint smile playing on her lips. One she herself didn't even notice. She turned and walked in another direction, taking a couple of steps before taking out her phone and booking a flight to a southern coastal city for 3 days later. When entering the destination, she hesitated for a moment, finally choosing the city she and Jiang Han had visited for their honeymoon 20 years ago. She couldn't explain why she chose that place. Perhaps it was because that period was the only pristine place in her memory untouched by what followed. Over the next 3 days, she did a few things. First, she visited her mother and had a meal with the old lady, transferring half of her savings to her mother's name to ensure her future financial security. Second, she went to the company, packed up her remaining personal belongings in a cardboard box, and took them with her. On her way, she passed by Jiang Han's old office. The door was open, and the interior had been rearranged. The painting she had given him years ago had been replaced with a new landscape painting. Third, she invited old Zhou for one last tea, handing him the original copy of Chun Lang's violation record that she had taken from the safe, asking him to handle it with the audit team. As old Zhou accepted the document, he looked at her and sighed. "Su Qing, you left so decisively this time. It makes me feel like you've grown 10 years older all of a sudden." Su Qing picked up her teacup and smiled. "Uncle Zhou, people who have fallen before are more careful when they walk. I was too arrogant before, thinking I could hold on to everything. Now I know that the tighter you hold on to some things, the faster they slip away. Letting go brings freedom." That afternoon, it was drizzling when she left old Zhou's house. She didn't use an umbrella, walking in the rain, letting the fine raindrops touch her face. Cool and refreshing, like a silent cleansing. She reached the bus stop on the street corner, looking at the bus routes she had never taken before, and suddenly realized that she had never truly known this city. She had lived in this place for 40 years, commuting daily along the same routes and within the same social circles. like a caged bird believing the cage was the sky. Her phone rang. It was a message from the contact person at the headhunting firm. "Hello, Ms. Su. Mr. Jiang has already spoken with us. We have a few positions suitable for your background. Would you like to schedule a time to discuss them online?" Su Qing stood in the drizzle, the wind making her shrink back. But she still typed a reply. "Okay. Tomorrow or the day after is fine if it's convenient. Thank you." She put her phone away, glanced at the gray sky, and boarded the bus that had just pulled into the station. She didn't know where the bus was going, but she decided to ride it to the last stop. The street scenes outside the window receded frame by frame, the familiar buildings and intersections becoming blurred blocks of color in the rain, like an old movie rewinding. As the bus passed the group's building, she saw several television broadcast vans parked at the main entrance. A few reporters with cameras were interviewing a man in a suit on the steps. She didn't recognize him. Probably the new public relations director. The building's electronic screen displayed slogans proclaiming the full recovery of XX Group's business and the new management's leadership in upgrading and transformation. The red background and white lettering stood out starkly in the rainy weather. She looked away, leaned back in her seat, and closed her eyes. An old song played on the bus radio, a gentle female voice singing, "Don't look back. Keep walking forward without looking back." Listening to those lyrics, she suddenly felt that countless years separated her from this song. But the melody remained the same. Only the listener had already stood at the starting point of another journey. In her third week living in a southern coastal city, Su Qing received a package. The sender's address was the headquarters of a well-known multinational corporation, and the recipient's name and current address were listed. She opened the letter of intent and found a formal offer letter for the position of strategic investment consultant for the China region. Her direct supervisor was a senior Asia-Pacific executive at headquarters whom she had met a few times before. She sat on the wicker chair on the balcony, watching the cargo ships passing by on the distant sea, and read it 3 times. The job description in the offer letter perfectly matched her experience of the past 10 years. Although the salary wasn't as high as when she was chairman, it was enough for her to live a decent life in this city. She noticed a handwritten note at the bottom of the offer letter. "Ms. Su, we learned about your situation through General Manager Jiang and look forward to working with you. Please contact me directly if you have any questions." She stared at the handwritten note in silence for a long time, then sent Jiang Han a message. "The position you recommended has sent me an offer letter. Thank you." Half an hour later, Jiang Han replied, "Congratulations. You deserve a better opportunity. I'm currently undergoing internal restructuring, and the board of directors has officially appointed me as the permanent CEO. That's great. After all, this is a place you've poured your heart and soul into for 12 years. You're more suited to manage it than I am." She didn't feel bitter when she typed those words. That emotion had been metabolized over the past few weeks, leaving only a calm, almost objective statement. Jiang Han replied again. "Are you doing okay over there?" "I'm fine. I see the sea every day, run in the morning, and read and write in the evening. I cut my hair short and lost 6 pounds. Don't get too thin." Su Qing smiled at those 3 words. She put down her phone, got up, went into her bedroom to change her clothes, took the letter of intent, and went to the nearest print shop to sign, scan, and send the receipt back. As she left the print shop, the sea breeze blew in her face, carrying a salty, damp scent. She stood under the shade of a tree by the roadside and took a deep breath of that smell, feeling as if her lungs had been cleansed. On her way back, she received a video call from her mother. The old lady's face appeared on the screen. She looked much better than when Su Qing had left, her hair freshly dyed and wearing lipstick. "Ching Ching, how's the weather where you are? Do you want Mom to come stay with you for a while?" Su Qing asked. "Mom, just stay home and relax. I'll come back to see you once I'm settled here." Su Qing held her phone up a little so her mother could see the sea view behind her. "Look at this sea. Isn't it beautiful? When you come, I'll watch the sea with you every day." The old lady smiled broadly on the other end of the screen. Okay. I'll wait for you to come back and pick me up." "Oh, right. Ching Ching, I put something in your safe. I only remembered it after you left. Your dad left an old photo at the very bottom of the safe. You probably didn't find it. Remember to look at it when you come back." After hanging up, Su Qing stood by the roadside and thought about it. She hadn't really looked through the bottom of the safe much. It was full of old things. She wasn't in a hurry to go back and see it. She didn't want to go back to that city yet. Perhaps it was better to stay a little further away. That night, she sat at her desk in her rented room, turned on her computer, and prepared to start researching the background information for her new job. She scrolled to the multinational corporation's website and saw that their recent investment strategy in China overlapped with several overseas projects she had led in the group years ago. She suddenly realized that the experience and resources she thought were completely useless had become shining assets on a different platform. Jiang Han was right. She just needed a stepping stone. Her 20 years of accumulated experience hadn't disappeared because of that defeat. They were just temporarily covered in dust, waiting for the right time to be polished again. She worked until 11 p.m. when her phone vibrated. It was a message from old Zhou, Su Qing. The audit results are in. Chen Lang's violations have been verified. The audit team has officially submitted the materials to the relevant institutions. He is currently overseas, and the relevant institutions are initiating cross-border procedures. No new issues were found during the audit. The record of the 37 million return is complete. The audit report concludes that the violations have been corrected and no subsequent problems were found. Su Qing looked at the message and slowly leaned back in her chair. The audit was over, and her name had been cleanly erased from the report. She didn't emerge unscathed from this turmoil. She lost her position as chairwoman, her shares, her marriage, and that chapter of her life she had once been so proud of. But at least her final confessions and attempts to salvage the situation preserved a shred of dignity. She replied to old Zhou with 4 words, "Thank you, Uncle Zhou." Then she shut down her computer and went to the balcony. The sea at night was different from the daytime. The inky blue water stretched to the horizon, the details of the waves invisible. Only the rhythmic sound of the tide lapping against the distant rocks could be heard. She leaned against the railing, letting the sea breeze tousle her hair, closing her eyes to listen to that regular and constant sound. She suddenly remembered a night many years ago, when she and Jiang Han were on their honeymoon, standing like this on the balcony by the sea. Back then, Jiang Han hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, and they watched together as the lights of a cargo ship slowly moved in the distance. She had said then, "Let's live by the sea when we're old." And Jiang Han had agreed, saying he would work hard to earn money to buy a sea view house. Later, they did make money and could afford many sea view properties. But that night they spent watching the sea together was overshadowed by countless arguments and scheming, something she could only revisit after a very long time. She opened her eyes, took her phone out of her pocket, and scrolled to the bottom of the photo album. The photos from that year were still there. Jiang Han's trousers were soaked by the waves at the beach, and she was smiling, her eyes crinkling with laughter. They were eating seafood at a roadside stall. Jiang Han's face flushed red from the chili peppers. The two of them were holding hands on the beach at dusk, leaving a trail of footprints, which the tide washed away again and again. She looked through the photos, then turned off the screen. Without deleting them, her phone vibrated again. This time it was from the contact person at the headhunting company, Miss Su. "The official version of the offer confirmation letter has been sent to your email. Please check it. Also, Mr. Jiang asked me to pass on a message to you. Let bygones be bygones. And take care of yourselves from now on." After reading the message, Su Qing typed "received. Thank you," then turned her phone to silent and placed it on the small table on the balcony. She turned and went back to her bedroom, rummaged through her suitcase for her old sweater that she'd worn for ages, put it on, then sat back down at her desk, turned on her computer again, and began diligently studying the new company's business materials. The sound of waves crashing outside the window continued incessantly, a deep, rhythmic sound like the heartbeat of the world. As she typed the first line of notes, a faint smile, almost imperceptible to herself, played on her lips. The clivia on her desk was one she'd bought 2 weeks ago from a flower stall next to the market. Its leaves were vibrant green, and it sat in a white terracotta pot in the upper left corner of her desk. Facing her, she reached out and touched the leaf. Her fingertips brushed against its cool surface, and the leaf trembled slightly before gently cradling her fingers. She spoke to the plant softly, as if to herself, "Live well from now on." Then she lowered her head, the screen light reflecting on her face, and continued typing. The night outside the window was deep, and the tide surged and receded tirelessly. In the distance, The lights of cargo ships cast long golden tails on the inky water, like a gentle hand smoothing out all the rough marks.